11 months ago, I did something that I never thought that I would do. I tried out World of Warcraft Classic. Originally, I planned to simply play the launch of the 20th anniversary realms, and well, I enjoyed it that much that I just kind of never stopped. And eventually, I set myself a little goal. I want to level every single class in vanilla World of Warcraft. And so far, we have done Warrior, Mage, Druid, and most recently, we just finished Hunter. Now, I definitely don't plan to stop making videos on the Hunter. In fact, I have at least a couple more planned out. But for now, I have decided to compile all 9 of the Hunter videos into one long movie-style video. And just before we start, I'd like to say that if you enjoy this kind of thing, then feel free to subscribe to the channel, because it costs you nothing and it means the world to me. So with that now out of the way, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. If you have been watching this channel recently, then this video might confuse you, because I only recently started leveling a new character, which was my first ever Horde character and my first time playing a rogue. Well, the reason we are starting another so soon is because I've recently gained the need for a hunter. But what could I possibly need a hunter so badly for? Well, that's for a future video, but don't fret, because we will be going back to the rogue sooner or later. But for now, it's time to return to the Alliance as I attempt to level my first ever hunter. And I hope to return to my favourite zones and make sure that I explore every zone that I haven't been in yet. So step 1 to playing World of Warcraft, which is arguably the most important part, creating a character. Now, originally, my plan was to play a dwarf hunter. However, I have future plans for what I want to do with a dwarf, so I ended up going with a night elf. And besides, I really enjoyed playing night elf last time, and last time I actually skipped quite a lot of the night elf quests, so I'm looking forward to doing it again. So I customized my character to how I like, and I picked the most appropriate name I could think of. Loading into a new character for the very first time, you can't help but get excited, knowing that there is an entire world to quest in, and more importantly, a new class to explore and learn. And just like that, Farton Hunt is born. Now, of course, we start off with the very first quests of killing boars and sabres and collecting moss. Now, the first thing I immediately noticed is that we don't actually spawn in with a pet, which I found slightly weird since the hunter's entire shtick is that they have a pet. But with a quick Google search, I learned that we can tame our first pet at level 10. I also learned that pets are a lot higher maintenance in Classic, needing to be fed, and we need to keep track of its happiness levels. So I look forward to learning more about that later. We then needed to climb a tree in order to visit our class trainer and learn our first new spell, Track Beasts, which I still haven't actually found a use for. We then had to head up to the back of the starting zone to kill spiders and visit what I believe is a sick night elf. After turning those in, I then had to go all the way back to the spider cave so that I could collect a spider egg, which got us to level 5. And I then began making my way out of Shadowglen and into Teldrassil. Once we had arrived at Dolinar, we got stuck straight into completing quests, where we have to kill more sabres, spiders, and oversized pigeons, and the first of many quests where we need to fill a vial with some kind of delicious looking fluorescent liquid. And since we are just here completing quests, I might as well explain what my goal is for this character. Obviously, the end goal is to get to max level and use it for undisclosed hunter business, but that is a long way down the road. For today at least, the goal is just like every other Alliance character, to complete a run of the Deadmines. I managed to force my way into a random house where I found another NPC offering quests, so naturally I accepted it, and definitely didn't die to the local security. And after turning in the first chunk of Dolinar quests, we then had to venture off a little bit into Teldrassil, where we killed timberlings for timberling seeds and picked timberling sprouts. I then had to enter WoW Classic Hell, also known as a cave, and granted, I made it very far into this place until I reached the mob that I needed to kill and discovered that I was in fact not able to kill it, so I ended up just skipping skipping that quest. So instead, I decided to head for our first trip into Darnassus, where I could accept a few more quests and visit my class trainer for the first time in a while. Afterwards, I went back into Teldrassil for more Timberling murder, this time for mossy tumors. It was then time for the Harpy quest, which I hate, because these mobs are just about the ugliest things I have ever laid eyes upon. And whilst I was doing that, I was able to find Mist the Cat, who took us on a short but fulfilling escort quest. Now after this, we were so close to level 10, and all the quests that were available around me were level 12 and 13, so I decided to just grind out some mobs, and pretty quickly we reached level 10, which means it's time for us to get our first ever pet. Now of course we don't just get given the tame pet spell, no. That would be far too easy. But first we have to visit an NPC in Dolinar who takes us on a short quest chain where we simply need to use an item that temporarily tames a beast for us. We first tame a spider, then a cat, and then a pigeon. And I suppose this is just to teach you how taming works, which is strange because this game doesn't usually teach you anything. It just throws you into the world and says have fun. But after turning in the last of that short quest chain, we are given the ability to tame pets. Now it was at this point that I started doing a little bit more research, and I learned that you can actually learn different pet abilities and then teach those abilities to other pets. And of course, I found the optimal taming route for me, which began with taming a spider. Then all we have to do is feed him some meat and kill mobs until we have learned the Bite rank 2 spell. Step 2, I tamed a pigeon for the claw ability, and finally I tamed a cat, which I could now teach Claw, Bite, and Growl. And of course, I named him Gerald. Now last time that we played a Night Elf, you guys got annoyed at me because I said I had never done Darkshore before, and then skipped Darkshore. So now that we are level 10 and have outgrown Teldrassil, I made my way across on a boat where we could begin our journey in Darkshore. Now when I got there wasn't a vast amount of quests that I was able to do. However, there was enough for now to allow us to gain a few levels. So starting off with the easiest, which was a quest that required us to run up and down the beach killing crabs. Next was a pretty annoying quest actually, making us swim around killing threshers for their eyes. And you know, the thing I've started to notice is that hunters are perfectly capable of killing mobs 2, 3, and 4 levels higher, which is great since on my warrior I sometimes struggled to kill mobs that were only a single level higher. I then headed up north a bit to kill grells and loot a moonstone seal, which I would need for a quest down south, so I started moving down there. And along the way I picked up sea creature bones and made Gerald kill his own kind. I also had to capture a rabid thistle bear and paid a visit to this camp that was full of humanoid bear things. And after capturing a rabid thistle bear, I then had to kill 20 of them. But eventually, I made it to my southern destination, which was ruins of some kind that were swarming with lots and lots of spirits. And whilst we were here, we needed to kill some mobs and loot highborn relics, and then destroy the seal which we had previously looted at the Sacred Flame. And after that, it was a simple case of finishing up the bear killing quest, and I started heading back up north. Now, everything up here was just a little bit too high level for me, and I did attempt to do a few quests, but sadly, I had to give up. So, my first time in Darkshore. What did I think? Well, I'll be totally honest, I actually wasn't that big of a fan, which is strange because I like Teldrassil and I like Ashenvale, and Darkshore really isn't too different from those, so I'm not entirely sure what it was that I didn't like. Darkshore was now pretty much completed, and I wasn't high enough level yet for Ashenvale, so I had to venture off a bit to find another zone to quest in, and I know it's not everybody's favourite, but I decided to go into Westfall. The thing about Westfall is that sooner or later we were going to have to quest here regardless because of one specific item called the Tunic of Westfall, a quest reward from one of the Deadmines quests. This piece of gear is just way too good to pass up. 11 agility for me would last a very long time. So I made my way into Westfall and began doing the quest that I had done many times before, like killing Harvest Watchers, collecting the ingredients for Westfall stew, and collecting Gore Tusk snouts. And with those first few introductory quests out of the way, we could get to work on the quests that actually mattered, like the red leather bandanas, and most importantly, the People's Militia, because I believe it's this quest chain that will grant me the Tunic of Westfall. And whilst I was doing that, I managed to finish up Gore Tusk killing and Harvest Watcher murder. I also happened to completely forget about the Pocket Watch quest, so I ended up going back there and doing that. I then got started on the next People's Militia quest of killing killing looters and pillagers, and paid a visit to the local gnolls so that I could rip off their paws. And really there was only a couple of quests left. Of course it was the next part of the People's Militia, having us kill Defias Highwaymen, Knuckle Dusters, and Pathstalkers. And lastly, the Defias Messenger quest. So I grouped up with a couple of people and we patiently camped the spawn for him. And I think he was already off away at the other side of the zone because it took a while for him to respawn. And finally for Westfall was escorting the messenger to the entrance of the Deadmines. And after turning that in, we luckily hit level 17, which means we are now able to do the Deadmines. So I found myself a group and we got started straight away. Now pretty much every time I go into a dungeon, I like to have a look at the loot pool just to see what loot I should be chasing. And I thought maybe there would be like a bow or maybe a belt or something cool to get, but sadly there really wasn't a whole lot of loot that would be good for us. The only really notable items would be the Impaling Harpoon, a pole arm that would offer us 7 agility, and like I said previously, agility is absolutely insane for us, as well as the Cape of the Brotherhood, giving us even more agility. We took down the first boss, Razorfen, with ease, and moved into the next room where we could find the boss Sneed, one of my favourites. It's not difficult, but I like the idea of the boss popping out of his armoured shell. We cleared our way through the next room, which is absolutely infested with goblins, until we reached Gilnid, who sadly did not drop the caster ring. After a few more minutes of clearing out the dungeon, we make it into the last room where we find Mr. Smite and take him down pretty quickly. We then move along the edge of the big ship until we get to the boss Captain Foreskin, the boss that can drop the Impaling Harpoon. And surprisingly, he actually did drop it, a very nice upgrade for us once we hit level 20. And for the technically final boss of the dungeon, Edwin Van Cleef. And usually he can be pretty tough because he constantly spawns adds that don't despawn when he dies. But nope, we were able to kill him very cleanly, but sadly he did not drop the cloak we were after. And finally is Captain Cookie, who did not drop his lovely wand. So we had managed to complete a run of the Deadmines, which means we had completed the little goal that I had set for us. However, I still wanted to get my hands on the cloak because it would last a very long time and I think that it'll be really worth it. So I quickly turned in the quest to claim my Westfall tunic and headed straight back into the dungeon for another run. And the run was pretty much the same. We killed Razorfen, Sneed and Gilnid and then made our way into the last room of the dungeon, where we kill Mr. Smite and Captain Greenskin, who only dropped the Defias belt. And finally was Van Cleef, who once again we really didn't have any issues with killing. I must be blessed with the skills of a hunter, but unfortunately he only dropped the Corsair's overshirt. On the bright side though, Cookie happened to drop the wand, which is a very nice pickup for the casters. Last time was my first time playing a hunter, and it was all about learning the basics of the class. We powered through the Night Elf spawn zone and Teldrassil until we got to level 10, where we could learn how to tame our first pet. We also explored Darkshore for the first time and of course went through Westfall, where we ended by taking on the Deadmines and we got a nice little weapon upgrade. For today, I have set myself the goal of completing a run of our second dungeon, which is none other than the Stormwind Stockades. To start the day off, I decided to go back into the Deadmines for a couple of runs. Now that was for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, we were level 19 and the weapon I had managed to get myself last time requires level 20 to equip, so I wanted to quickly do that before heading out to another zone to quest. Secondly, because I wanted the Cape of the Brotherhood. This cloak would give us a very nice 6 agility, and agility is absolutely insane for us, and this would last for a good long while. So we take down Mr. Smite and Captain Greenskin and move on to the final boss of the dungeon, Edwin Van Cleef, who is the boss that can drop the cloak we are after. Now as a group, we decided that we would just nuke down Edwin, which can be pretty risky, and well, I could see that we were about to wipe, so I quickly looted Van Cleef to see what dropped, and well, we didn't get it this time. and I'm glad I did loot it, because we actually never went back to kill Captain Cookie. Now after one run, I wasn't quite level 20 yet, so I decided to jump back in for one last run, and I said to myself that this would be the last run. If I didn't get the cloak now, I'm not going to go back in. So once again, we kill Mr. Smite and Captain Foreskin, and by the time we got to Edwin, someone had left the party. So once again, we decided to just nuke Edwin, which would almost certainly result in death. So I quickly looted the corpse again, and the cape dropped. And we were rolling against 3 other people, but we win the cloak. Oh yes, that is huge. Now, before we head off into the world a bit to grind some XP, our last run did happen to get us to level 20, so I paid a visit to the Weapon Master in Stormwind and he taught us how to use polearms. And I gotta say, I was very disappointed with the appearance because it is literally just a stick. And one last thing before heading out, I paid a visit to the Hunter Trainer where I updated every single one of my abilities. Now, my original plan was to head into Ashenvale, since I hadn't done a massive amount of questing there before, but I wasn't quite high enough level for all of the quests yet, so instead I decided to head into Redridge Mountains, an absolutely beautiful zone with a solid amount of quests to keep us busy, so I hopped on a bird and made my way over there. This zone really is incredibly cool. It has cozy buildings and a natural atmosphere. What more could you possibly want from a World of Warcraft zone? I picked up all of the nearby quests and I got to work, starting with the easiest of all of them, having a swim around in the lake to find a lost necklace. Next, I went to the other part of the lake to slay murlocs and retrieve a lost toolbox. How you drop a toolbox into the center of a giant lake is beyond me. I then attempted to get started with the Redridge Goulash, collecting tough condor meat, but for whatever reason, the drop chance on the meat is so incredibly low. So I skipped doing that for now until we could head up north where more would spawn. And as I was passing, I started taking down murlocs for their fins, which was nice and easy since most of them were a lot lower level than I am. I then went to the south of the zone where I quickly picked up spider meat and gore tusk snouts before I began my rampage on the gnolls, killing 10 gnoll mongrels and 6 gnoll poachers, which wasn't too hard at all. And huge shout out to this pig because his sacrifice got us to level 21, but we were still far from done in Redridge. I then went north where I of course located many more condors. I then attempted to do one of the other gnoll murder quests, but Questy is such a liar because it's telling me that this quest is suitable for players around the level 23 mark, but most of the mobs here are level 25, 26 and 27. I feel betrayed, so I ended up just skipping that quest for now and instead went to do the other gnoll quest, having us kill gnolls for iron pikes and iron rivets, which was far easier quest than the other one. And finally, I paid a visit to the smelly orcs up north so that I could kill them and steal their axes, which I definitely did completely flawless. So I turned in the last of my quests and well, that was it for Redridge. The only quests left were the elite quests, which I didn't really feel like trying to locate a group for, so I decided to pack it up and start making my way towards Ashenvale. Now I have done Ashenvale before, but just once, and I remember skipping over a few of the quests, so I was looking forward to exploring what I had missed. Before I could make it to Astronar, I quickly stopped off at the side of the road to visit an NPC called Talon, who was offering quests. Pretty simple, we just needed to collect a statuette that was surrounded by a couple of sea snakes. His follow-up quest wanted me to go to the little island up north, but since that was a level 25 quest, I decided to just skip it for now and start journeying down to Astronar. But once again, I was distracted by another pretty annoying quest. We needed to weave in and out of undead mobs and collect hair plants, but eventually we make it to Astronar and I began collecting all of the available quests. So I headed out a bit towards this murloc infested pond because there was another quest giver who offered us the simple task of collecting a glowing gem from the surrounding murlocs. I then had to go back to the beach where I originally came from and slay wrathtails and tear off their heads. And this is where I saw my first horde player. That little voice in the back of my head kept saying, "Attack him." But you know, he was just minding his own business and I was just questing, so I decided to just leave him alone and he also left me alone. So I finished up the quest and made my way back to Ashtanar, and I couldn't help but feel like I'd forgotten something. I just couldn't remember what, until I looked over at my other monitor and I remembered that I was supposed to go to Loch Moden like 5 levels ago and get another pet, a boar. So I purchased myself a portal to Ironforge and began making the lengthy trip to Loch Moden. Now when I got to Loch Moden, I was actually somewhat upset that I had skipped this zone because I remembered just how much I loved it. Everything about it is perfect. The buildings, the atmosphere, and the quests all work together very well. But you know, I guess that's just more to look forward to on the next character. So I made my way over to the very east side of the zone where I found my new pet, peacefully grazing in the grass. Little does he know he's about to become my servant for the next 25 levels. Now you might be asking, how can I just abandon Gerald like that? Well, don't worry, for I have transferred Gerald's spirit into this very pig, and he seems to be very happy in his new body. Kind of. And since I was here, I decided to complete the only quest in the zone that wasn't grey yet. Kill trogs and collect stone idols off of their corpses. And I gotta say, I think trogs have officially earned the title of the second ugliest mob in the game, behind the harpies of course. So now I actually had a couple of leveling options. I could either go back to Ashenvale and finish that off, or I could put Ashenvale on pause and head over to the Wetlands. And well, since I was right here, I thought I might as well just go to the Wetlands. So I made the long and treacherous journey to Menethil Harbour and collected every quest in sight. I started here with killing some more gnolls, and I gotta say, this was a very annoying questing session because I was high enough level to be here. However, stupid new Gerald was not. He was only level 16, so I kept taking aggro off of Gerald and dying over and over again. But I decided to just tough it out anyway. After killing a bunch of gnolls, I then went on a slime rampage to try and find Sida's bag. Now I like the idea of this quest. The slime has consumed the bag and you've got to sift through all the slime to try and locate it. However, this quest took a stupidly long amount of time to complete because it just would not drop. And lastly, I had to go and kill more murlocs. Now you might be thinking that I've skipped over tons of the quests here, like the crocodile killing ones and stuff. Well no, I actually did do them, but I'll be totally honest, I think I deleted the first half of this zone by mistake. That's okay, because I could now turn in all of the quests and head back over to Ashenvale. We started Ashenvale basically where we left off. The west side of the zone was completed, so I went east and headed into the camp of the Foulwield, where we needed to run around and slay a load of these humanoid bear thingies, where I also teamed up with a friendly druid and his hunter friend, and we smashed through the quest nice and quickly. We then headed south to this pond that looked like a giant moonwell. Here we needed to slay water elementals for bracers, and to be honest, after this quest we were pretty much done with Ashenvale. There was a couple of much higher level quests to get done, but obviously I can't really do those right now. But in my quest log I had a couple of quests that would require me to head over into Stonetalon Mountains, so I headed over to the little cave and made my way through the mountain. Now I actually really like Stonetalon Mountains, which is strange because it's very similar to the Barrens, and well, I'm yet to meet a single person who likes the Barrens. And there's also not a huge amount of Alliance quests to get done, but there is a couple, and hopefully by the end of them, I will be high enough level to run the stockades. First up, I needed to head down to the Ventrico Lumberyard area and kill Ventrico employees. Now this area of Stonetalon is fantastic. When I think Stonetalon, this is exactly what I think of. Goblins cutting down trees in a broken forest, surrounded by massive goblin machinery and small streams of water. Now I noticed on my map that there was a quest giver inside of this cave, and I started having flashbacks to my rogue and was hesitant to enter at first. But you know what? I thought, I'm on a hunter now. It's a broken class, I should be completely fine. And then I remembered almost immediately why I didn't go inside. Because what appears to be just a lone kobold is actually 5 more of them hiding around the corners waiting to jump you. So, can you really blame me for skipping that quest? So instead, I turned in the 2 quests that I was able to complete and began making my way up north towards the flight point, where I passed a rather long snaking train of mid-level mages that were wearing no gear. But before I got all the way up north, I had to stop to complete the only other quest that I had for this area, which was to run around and kill Pridewings for their venom sacs, which took quite a while to be honest. But in the end, we got it done. And I had made my way all the way north where I could discover another flight point and turn in my final quest for Stonetalon Mountains. We were now level 24, which should be high enough level for the stockades, but we were literally just teetering on the end of it, and I wanted to quickly get to level 25 since it would be much more appealing for people looking for DPS. So I decided that it was about time I got started with leveling my herbalism skill, since I was so far behind with it. And just by sheer chance, I was able to get to level 25 by simply just discovering new parts of the map, which means it's definitely time for the Stormwind Stockades. So I quickly picked up all of the nearby dungeon quests and headed straight in. Now, let's be honest, there really isn't much to talk about when it comes to this dungeon. It's 20 minutes of killing 93 mobs that look identical to each other, and to top that off, there is practically zero loot to get from here. The only really notable thing would be the Defias Renegade Ring, which would offer 3 agility and 3 stamina. But it's a BOE, and they cost practically nothing on the auction house, so if I really wanted, I could just go and buy 2. And in fact, that's exactly what I did right after this dungeon. Now, I was actually expecting to have to do 2 runs in order to get the quests done, but once we reached the end of our run, we actually did get them all done, which to be honest, I was thankful for, because the stockades is just a miserable experience. I guess on the bright side though, it's quick, it's easy, and it's extremely accessible to anyone who wants to do it. Last time, we managed to hit level 25 by exploring through Redridge Mountains, Ashenvale, the Wetlands, and even Stonetalon Mountains, and we ended it all with running what is possibly the worst dungeon in the entire game, the Stormwind Stockades. For today, I want to set myself 3 separate goals to run 3 different dungeons. First is Blackfathom Deeps, the second is Gnomeregan, and the third is Razorfen Kraul. Starting the day off, we were in Redridge Mountains, slowly walking over to Duskwood for a bit of questing. Once we were here, I did all of the regular things, like picking up the flight point and collecting quests, before I started heading over to the west side of the zone, because all of the quests to the west are much lower level, and I didn't want to outgrow them. Now, Duskwood is a zone that I very much look forward to questing in. Now, subscribers of the channel will know that I originally hated this zone because of the aesthetic. I've never been much of a fan of the whole dark and spooky thing. However, the reason this place has grown on me is because of how simple and straightforward the questing is. If you look at my quest log, you notice that all of the quests are kill this thing and then kill that thing, and that's what I love doing. Chilling, running around the entire zone, murdering anything that moves. And I started that off with wolf murder, because that's like 95% of World of Warcraft. I then ran up and down the western edge of the zone to kill spiders. I then went to the graveyard to collect ghoul fangs, which got us to level 26. I then attempted to turn in whatever quest was down here, but yeah, that didn't quite go how I wanted it to. So after failing that, I paid a visit to the eastern graveyard, where we needed to kill skeletons and tear off their fingers. Next up was the Worgans, which were all a bit higher level than me, so it kind of felt like it was just a kite fest. But we got that down easy enough since it was only 6 of them. And you know, since I was close by, I decided that I want to try turning in whatever the quest was down here again. But these stupid stealth mobs don't seem to like me very much. So once again, I decided to leave it alone, and instead, I decided to return to Darkshire to turn in the first round of quests. I mean, is there a better feeling than being able to march back into town and turn in a million different quests? Well, of course, the only thing that rivals that is having a warrior steal my best in slot leather shoulders last week, and then not even equipping them. That's a classic. So I thought, what better way to start off the next round of quests than by going back to this stupid house surrounded by stealth mobs? Yup, really starting to hate whatever this quest is, but my curiosity had piqued. I had to know what was being kept from me, so I strategically pulled each mob and managed to clear the house out, only to discover that the quest wasn't even inside the house, but is in fact outside, buried under the ground. Yeah, I'm not so sure that was worth it. So with that out of the way, I returned to the western graveyard once again, where we killed skeletons and spiders. Simple enough. And this is where I also discovered the coolest ability in the entire game, Eyes of the Beast, aka Gerald Vision. Now I'm not sure if this has any actual practicality to it, but I just thought it was so cool. And then finally for Duskwood was the simple task of collecting some Rot Blossom. Now this is also where I got absolutely decimated by a mage, and I think I'm gonna need you guys to help me out with Hunter PvP a bit, because what the hell am I supposed to do in this situation, where they position themselves in the perfect place so that they are too close for me to shoot them, but also too far away for me to melee them. But anyway, I respawned, finished the quest, and I turned it in. Now this is where I started to get a little bit bored of Duskwood, and I wanted a change of scenery. So I had a look at my map, and I noticed that there was actually still a massive amount of quests to get done in the Wetlands, and also that last time I forgot to pick up the flight point there, so I had no choice but to catch a bird to Lochmoden and start running. Now I was making my way over to the Wetlands when I had a rather interesting message from a little dwarf asking if I wanted to join him and his friends for a run of Shadowfang Keep, and at first I didn't really want to, but then I remembered that I've never done Shadowfang Keep before, so eventually I said sure, why the hell not. And since there aren't any flight points even somewhat close to Shadowfang Keep, we all met up in Arathi and began running together. And you know, it's the simple things like this that make Classic WoW feel alive. A group of 5 people with the same goal, traversing through the open world. And well, after a good 10 or so minutes of running, we arrived at the dungeon entrance and we could get started. Now like I said, this is my first time ever running Shadowfang Keep in Classic, but it was one of the first ever dungeons that I did in retail when I first tried the game years ago, and it's so cool to be able to see where the things that I was somewhat familiar with came from. And I gotta say, there's not been a single instance yet that I thought the retail version was better. But anyway, we cleared up the first boss and patiently waited for the door to be unlocked, and that's when I encountered every hunter's worst nightmare. I had ran out of arrows. So, melee hunter for me it was, which I gotta say, really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Now, I thought this dungeon was really cool. Everything about it felt so well crafted and really created the feeling that you were inside of a haunted keep. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I actually went on to have a little read on the lore in this place after we were finished, and we were making some pretty good progress in the dungeons where things started to go a little bit south, because very suddenly, a massive swarm of Worgen begins charging down the stairs, and really our only choices were to either die or reset the mobs. And well, thanks to this roof, we were able to slip out of the dungeon nice and quickly, and we could then continue the dungeon in a civilized manner. And well, eventually, we make it to the final boss, Archmage Arugal. Now, although I thought the dungeon was cool, we really didn't gain that much XP, and that's because apart from the final section of the dungeon, every mob was grey for me. That being said, I don't regret doing it, because I think it's important that we get to experience absolutely everything that World of Warcraft has to offer. I logged on the next day and I was ready to grind some levels, and I wanted to go back to the Wetlands, only to remember that I still hadn't gotten the flight point yet. But once we got to Menethil, I of course started by picking up all of the nearby quests, and I did almost forget to pick up the flight point again. And as I was heading out to do some quests, I saw in the chat that someone was looking to do the elite quests. So naturally, I sent him a message and we managed to form a very reliable group consisting of 3 priests and a hunter. And you know, elite quests are elite quests. Sometimes they can be interesting, but really, as long as you have a group, you will be completely fine. Almost like an outdoors dungeon. Well, I say it's completely fine, but somehow we managed to pull the entire of the Wetlands at once. We can blame Gerald. But apart from that, it was completely fine. And turning in those quests got us to level 28. But the follow-up quest would offer us a belt that would give me an entire 1 agility upgrade, and it would require us to go all the way back to Stormwind and run the stockades, which I just didn't really think was worth it. but I did it anyway, and I managed to find myself this janky group that was attempting to do like a spell cleave kind of thing, which is great for me since all I really needed to do was stand back and let the mage do his thing. And for this quest, we just needed to kill one of the mini bosses that spawns inside and bring his head back to the quest giver. But apart from the mage dying twice, the run was smooth, and I could return to the wetlands and claim my slightly useless belt. Once back, I got started with a quest that would require us to run around the west coast and slay giant crocolisks to take their skin. Next, I went over to the Dragon Maw Orcs, where I decided to unboon. And originally, I thought this quest might be a bit annoying, since they like to use nets to root you in place, but thanks to my rallying cry of the Dragon Slayer, we were able to slice through them like it was nothing. I then went into this isolated pocket in the mountain where I came across a couple of quest givers, and they sent us on a quick raptor rampage. Once I turned that in, I got started with the next quest, which was Raptor Rampage version 2. Only this time we needed to pick up fragments of something. And lastly, we needed to slay Sorreltooth. And that was it. We had completed the wetlands. Well, mostly. The only remaining quest was the Cursed Crew. And if you watched my Druid series, which I suggest you do, then you'll know exactly how much I hate this quest. I returned to Stormwind only to discover that someone had adopted a rather strange looking dog. Some might call him Teramis the Devourer, but apart from that, I wanted to get my weapon enchanted with Fiery Weapon. Some would say that's completely useless for a hunter. However, I just think it makes me look cool. And with that out of the way, my next plan was to head into Blackfathom Deeps to crack out our first of the 3 dungeons. So I hopped on a bird and began flying towards Ashenvale. Now it took a while for us to find a group and to get started, like almost an entire hour. And to be honest, I can see why. It's long, you don't get a massive amount of XP, and there's next to no good loot. That being said though, there is a good handful of quests for you to complete. And in my opinion, this is a great dungeon, purely because it feels like a lot of care went into making it. And I actually did do a little lore research on this one too, and I found it really cool. Turns out it's an old temple that's now half underwater and taken over by the Twilight cultists, and Akumai is actually the pet of the old gods. Is that not insanely cool? So we take down the first 2 bosses and make it into the Murloc boss. And I don't know about you, but every single time I've ever done this dungeon, something bad always seems to happen at this part right here. But our tank had a brain, and we were able to get through all of the ads and the boss without any problem. And we could also pick up this weird orb thing for a very useless buff. Now as for the loot in here, like I said, none of it is particularly eye-catching. In fact, I don't think there is a single piece of loot in here that would be an upgrade whatsoever. Now up until this point here, the run had been absolutely flawless, but we overpulled just a little and sadly we wiped. But we respawned and pretty quickly we were standing in front of the second to last boss. Now I've always liked the next part. Before you can progress onto the final boss, you've got to take out 4 waves of mobs. Pretty cool and pretty notorious for wiping groups because someone thinks it's a fantastic idea to click all 4 of them at once. But we clear those up and head on through. And at first, I didn't even realize that we were fighting the boss because I'm so used to running the retail version and seeing a massive snake head flopping out of the ground. But that's it. We had completed a run of Blackfathom Deeps. So that's 1 down and 2 to go. Now, I was able to get a group for Gnomeregan significantly quicker than Blackfathom Deeps. And well, we got to the entrance and I discovered that I was in fact locked out of dungeons for another 6 minutes. But these guys were pretty chill and they said it's fine, they can wait. And well, I caught up with my team and they were already at Grubbis, which is great for me since I don't have to sit through that boring scenario. So here's the thing about Gnomeregan. When I first did it way back on my Warrior Fart and Sniff, I loved it. It was big, it was mysterious, and it was new for me. However, since then, I've slowly grown a massive hatred for this dungeon, like with every fibre of my being. And well, that's because I main Feral Druid, and the best in slot weapon for Feral Druids is of course the manual crowd pummeling. Pummeler, a weapon that increases attack speed. But the thing about this weapon is that it only has 3 charges. 3 charges that once used will never replenish. And I use between 6 and 10 of them every week, which means I've quite literally ran this dungeon hundreds of times. I mean hell, maybe even in the thousands by now. But we clear up the first few bosses in the dungeon and we get to the manual crowd pummeler. And would you believe it actually does drop? Lucky for the druid that was with us, because apart from having an absolutely insane ability, its stats are actually quite insane too, especially at this level. But eventually we make it to the final boss, Mechgineer Thermoplug, and he was significantly higher level than all of us, at a big level 34, but thanks to my epic kiting skills, we were able to get him down, and that's it. We had completed a run of Gnomeregan, which marks 2 down and only 1 to go. And the final dungeon on the list is of course Razorfen Kraul. Now this has always been a bit of a weird dungeon for me. I don't particularly like the dungeon, but I also don't hate it. If someone asked me to define the word meh, I could just show them this dungeon. On the bright side though, there are quite a lot of mobs here and the XP is quite plentiful. As for the loot here, there is actually quite a few different pieces. More specifically, the Ferine leggings would offer 9 strength and 8 agility, which would be an insanely big upgrade for us. And it has a 62% chance of dropping, which is great. The other thing to look forward to in here is a rare mob called the Blind Hunter, and we could either tame him or he could also drop the Night Stalker bow, one of the best hunter weapons available to me right now. So that's just another thing to look forward to. And well, we get into the bat-infested cave and no Blind Hunter is in sight. I also got murdered by said bats. So we move on to Agathelos the Raging, the boss that can drop our leggings. And halfway through the fight, the boss decided to take a little nap. Never seen that before. And well, the legs actually do drop, which I was very happy with. And then we went and did the final boss, Chargla Razorflank, who dropped a little shield for the tank. But before we left the dungeon, we could first drop down to do the escort quest. And well, after that we were done. We had completed a run of Razorfen Kraul, which marks 3 out of 3 dungeons finished and completed. Last time we managed to get level 30 by questing through Duskwood and the Wetlands and by taking on 3 separate dungeons, Blackfathom Deeps, Gnomeregan and Razorfen Kraul. Today I want to set the very simple task of getting to level 35. To start the day off, we were in Ironforge preparing for a run of Gnomeregan, because you guys made it very clear that I forgot about the Trip Runner dungarees. And you know, fair enough, these things are insanely powerful, and honestly, high chance I use them until level 60. Now for this run, I was actually running with a viewer of the channel that I randomly met in Ironforge, so shout out to that guy. So all we had to do to complete the quest and claim our new legs was kill the final boss, which we're gonna do anyway. And we did practically everything in the dungeon. We even killed Techbot outside and picked up all of the punch cards, which I suppose is just extra XP. We killed every single boss in the instance and eventually made it down to Mechgineer Thermoplug, and we take him down without any problems. And he did drop a solid ring for the tank, and all that was left to do now is turn in the quest and claim my shiny new legs. With our Gnomeregan errand done and out of the way, I decided it was time for a little bit of questing, and we were going to one of my favourite zones, the Thousand Needles, and more specifically, the part that I believe is called the Salt Flats. And after making the long run from Ratchet, we arrived at our destination. Now this seems like a zone that a lot of people would hate on, but personally, I love it, because it's very unique, completely flat and covered in a thick fog, which gives it a very ominous and mysterious vibe, and I really love that. But aside from the way the zone feels, the quests are also very similar to Duskwood. Simple. Kill this thing and kill that thing. So first off, I killed scorpids to collect their venom, turtles for their shells, vultures for their bones, horde for their honor, and slaying basilisks. Not because we need anything from the basilisks, the locals just don't seem to like the basilisks very much. And we also had to run around and collect rocket car parts, which is kinda just epic in its own right. And well, I was just finishing up the quests where I happened to loot an Iron Weaver off of a vulture, and I don't know, a night elf using a gun just doesn't sound or look right, but the item is blue. blue equals good. So I learned the gun skills in Ironforge and then took myself over to Duskwood to start leveling it. Now originally my plan was to head into the northern part of Stranglethorn Vale. However, I'm just a little bit too low, and there really isn't many other options for questing from levels 30 to 35, but there is one place, a place that is canon in the story of every single World of Warcraft character, Scarlet Monastery, a place worse than hell itself. So reluctantly, I flew over to Darkshore and began making the long walk to the entrance. On the bright side though, finding a group for the graveyard portion of the dungeon really isn't that difficult, and this dungeon isn't that hard. In fact, it's so easy, we did this run with only 4 people. However, if we're being honest, it's really not that fun to do. It's small and there's not a lot of mobs. However, if you have a solid group, you can clear it within about 10 to 15 minutes, and 4 runs of this and you've gained yourself a level, so you can't really complain at that. Now the only boss in the dungeon that isn't a rare mob is Blood Mage Thalnos. Now he's a pretty cool looking guy, but sadly he does not drop any loot that we care about. Once finished with Graveyard, I got invited to join a group for Library, and I can't lie, when we started I didn't really have high expectations because everyone in the group was only about level 30, and this dungeon is a lot more fun and engaging than Graveyard. More mobs, more bosses, more XP. The first of the 2 bosses in here is Houndmaster Loxy. Now he is a strange one because his loot gives a pretty big chunk of attack power, but only when fighting beasts. I mean, could you imagine how insane it would be if this staff was just plus 60 attack power? And to be honest, I love having big items to chase while leveling, and I wish there was more of it. But after killing Loxy, we're making our way through the dungeon and everything is just getting harder and harder, and we just weren't high enough level for it. And to top that off, somebody had left the party, and well, after pulling and wiping, we agreed as a group to just disband. But we got most of the XP out of the dungeon anyway, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. So we now had a couple runs of Scarlet Monastery under our belt, but we just weren't quite high enough level yet for Stranglethorn Vale. So instead, I went back to South Shore for a bit of questing. So I started off here the same way that everyone else does, with a bit of Murloc killing. And everything was fine, but I kept noticing that Gerald couldn't hold threat, which was quite frustrating because the entire reason that I blessed Gerald with the body of a pig was because I read somewhere that they are quite tanky and hold threat very well. And that's when I decided to do a little bit of research. And I learned that I was like 25 levels behind on my pet abilities. I thought that once you had taught an ability to a pet that it would just scale as they level up. I was very wrong, and I actually needed to go through the whole process of taming a pet that already knows the ability and then teach it to Gerald. So first up on that list was to get Bite rank 5, and that was nice and simple. I just needed to take a short flight over to Arathi and find one of these plains creepers. I named him Ridley. All we had to do then was kill mobs with Ridley until it pops up in the chat that we had learned the Bite rank 5. Next up, I learned that pet trainers existed, and just like your normal trainers, they teach you the ability and you can then teach that ability to your pet, which is pretty cool. And like the absolute idiot that I am, I decided to just teach everything to Gerald until I was out of training points. And now I couldn't teach Bite rank 5 to Gerald. Idiot. But lastly, we actually needed to go all the way to Redridge Mountains, which just goes to show how far behind we are on this, and we needed to tame the quest mob Bellygrub for charge rank 3, which I now also couldn't teach to Gerald. We did get Grubble rank 5 though, so that's at least something. So with all of that nonsense out of the way, I returned to South Shore once again to resume my Murloc murder, where I met a little gnome, and we decided to group up and take down the quest together. And this is what I love about Classic, teaming up with random strangers in the world, going from killing one mob at a time to killing 7 at a time. After that, I ran up and down the east coastline killing seamen, and ever since I managed to get Gerald a rank 5 growl, the threat thing really isn't a big problem anymore. So I knew that once I had enough training points for Bite, Gerald would become my own personal tank. Next, I headed up north towards Alterac Mountains to slay mountain lions. Mountains. And every single time I've done this quest before, it's always been swarming with people, so it was nice to actually just smash through the quest this time. Now apart from that, we were done with Hillsbrad. However, I did have a quest that led me into Alterac Mountains, the task of slaying syndicate mobs. And this quest was actually quite difficult, since they were only spawning in these massive camps, so I had to strategically pull each mob carefully, otherwise I might just pull all 10 of them at once. And all that was left to do now is turn in the quests and claim my much needed XP. Now we still weren't quite high enough for Stranglethorn Vale, but we were so close to level 33, so without many other options, I once again returned to Scarlet Monastery. Also, shout out to this guy because he was chill. So I found myself a group that was doing Graveyard, which almost immediately got us to level 33, and this run was very smooth, and we actually got one of these rare mobs in here, the Fallen Champion. I mean, he doesn't drop anything that we care about, but still, it's nice to at least see one of them. We then take down Blood Mage Thalnos, and we moved on to doing a library run. And well, this group kind of had the same issue as the first library run, where everyone was just a little bit too low. Well, after wiping again, we all agreed to once again disband. But we were now level 33, and that should be enough to start questing in Stranglethorn Vale. Now I don't know about you, but I love Stranglethorn Vale. The jungle aesthetic is easily one of my favourites. Plus you get a wide array of different kinds of quests here. Now we weren't high enough yet to start the quest down in Booty Bay, but all of the northern quests should be my level. And I started off with the Curzon quest, having us run around the Curzon camp and kill different kinds of Curzon mobs, and collecting some crates. Simple enough. I then turned those quests in and made my way south a little bit until I reached the campfire with all of the NPCs standing around it, and they gave us a string of murder quests, and I mean they really don't like the nearby wildlife. I first had to kill 10 young tigers and 10 young panthers, and the follow-up quest was to kill 10 regular tigers and 10 regular panthers, and at the same time we killed Stranglethorn raptors. And would you believe that the follow-up quest was to kill 10 elder tigers? I can't help but laugh because we just slaughtered an entire bloodline of tigers, and to top that off, we had to kill Sindal, which I'd assume is like the leader of the tigers, I suppose. But after bringing the tigers to the brink of extinction, we were kind of forced to be done with Stranglethorn Vale for now, because everything was just getting too high level for me. So once again, I was stuck staring at my map, trying to find a place to quest, and really the only place left was Arathi. Now this is another zone that I quite like, because it feels very natural with the rolling green hills, but at the same time it feels like a zone of conflict with the two different factions being here. So first up, I attempted to do the next part of Hints of a New Plague, where we have to escort this night elf somewhere, but after pulling like 8 mobs at once, I decided that I would just skip that one for now. I then went over to the far west of the zone, to this farm area which was surrounded by Syndicate, where we needed to kill Syndicate mobs. And I also found this rare mob, and well, naturally I wanted to kill it, but for whatever reason it was stuck inside this impenetrable shack, so I just had to leave it be. Next, I went to the far east of the zone, to this area that was swarming with trolls. We needed to kill axe throwers for their tusks and witch doctors for their medicine pouches. We then needed to enter into this troll infested cave where we needed to kill shadow hunters for a shadow knife, which luckily I was able to get on the very first mob. Now unfortunately that was it for Arathi. Now I don't know if it's just me, but I remember there being more quests here. I know that there's elite quests, but I remember there being quests to the northeast, but maybe I'm just going insane. But that once again left me looking at my map, trying to find a place to get some levels, since we were now so close to level 35. So I went all the way back to Scarlet Monastery. Now luckily, I was able to find myself a group that was doing multiple library runs. Well, hopefully this time we can actually complete an entire run without disbanding. Now luckily the tank was actually level 38, so surely it will be fine this time. So we kill Loxie and begin making our way through the final part of the dungeon, and well, we actually do get to the final boss this time, and we take him down and he drops the staff, which is great for the casters. Now at this point, we were teetering on the edge of level 35, so I stayed for one last run, and this run was exactly the same as the last. We kill Loxie and clear through the final section, and on the pack right before the final boss, we managed to hit level 35. Last time, we managed to achieve level 35 by exploring through Hillsbrad and Stranglethorn Vale, and of course, running Scarlet Monastery a lot. And we've even managed to get ourselves some pretty huge upgrades, like the Trip Runner Dungarees and randomly finding an Iron Weaver off of a mob. But today is a big day, because we are closing in on level 40, which means our goal is to purchase our first mount. Starting the day off, we had a little bit of an issue. Subscribers of the channel will know that I seem to have a bit of a habit of skipping quests and leaving zones early. Unfortunately, that's left me in a bit of a position where I currently have no zones to go and quest in. However, once I hit level 36, I should be able to go and freely quest around Dustwallow Marsh. So the only option I really had was to go and grind out XP in Scarlet Monastery, which we had already done quite a lot of. However, in the previous video, we were limited to Scarlet Library and Scarlet Graveyard, which are okay for XP, but not great. However, we are now high enough level to head into the Armory portion of the dungeon. Now, in my opinion, Armory is the best of the 4 dungeons. When I think of Scarlet Monastery, this is exactly what I think of. Long, winding halls that are absolutely filled to the brim with mobs. But it's not just because of how the dungeon feels, but it's also extremely efficient for grinding XP, simply because of how many elite mobs there are. Now, this dungeon really does take me back to the beginning of the year when our journey together all started, because I was grinding out my first ever character, and this dungeon was like the first big grind, spending hours and hours running it over and over again, desperately trying to hit level 40, but also trying to get every piece of loot out of here that I could, because the loot in this dungeon is some of the greatest leveling loot in the entire game, not only providing warriors with insane stats, but also giving them one of the most iconic looks in World of Warcraft. Now, although the items are male items, which we will be able to equip very soon, but unfortunately, the items are only providing strength, which is only good for the melee weapons, and what we want is agility. So as much as I would like to say that we're going to run the dungeon until we get every piece of gear, sadly there would just be no point in doing that. But after a good 15 to 20 minutes of clearing out the mobs, we get to the one and only boss of the dungeon, Herod, who I would say is a very iconic World of Warcraft boss, because in retail, one of the greatest abilities is Bladestorm, which if I'm not mistaken, originated from this boss and his weapon, Ravager, where he spins his weapon around dealing massive AoE damage, which I can't lie, was a bit of a pain for us, because Gerald doesn't seem to recognize mechanics very well, and he was just going at him, man. You know, Gerald was seeing red and wanted that Herod ass, but we get him down, and Herod dropped the shoulders, which if I'm not mistaken is the rarest of all of the pieces of loot, but we also got a very nice chunk of XP. Now luckily this group that I was in were planning to grind out quite a bit and were heading into library, so obviously I joined them. Now library is fine, I don't mind it, but I definitely wouldn't say that I enjoy it. Plus you don't get as much XP, so there's that as well. This dungeon does have 2 bosses though, and the first one is Houndmaster Loxie, and the second is Arcanist Doan, who does also have a mechanic. Simply, he casts Detonation, which deals massive damage, and the only way for you to avoid it is by hiding behind a wall. And he dropped the Illusionary Rod, which is a pretty nice pickup for the casters. And as you can see, the XP we gained just is nowhere close to what we get in Armory. But after this run, we headed back into Armory, which was basically the exact same as the first time we did it. We clear our way through the long halls until we get to Herod, and Gerald did not have a very good time again, but he did drop the Scarlet Leggings, which is weird because on my warrior I was able to get every piece of loot possible from him except the leggings. I probably did 30-ish runs on my warrior and I didn't see them once. But unfortunately, after that, this group disbanded, so I went off to get myself another group for the dungeon, which was once again the exact same as last time. And after killing Herod, we managed to hit level 36. Now that we are high enough level, it's time to head out for a bit and into Dustwallow Marsh. Now normally, this would be quite a lengthy run, however, there is two ways to get there quicker. Firstly, take the boat in Menethil, and that would take us straight to Theramore. However, if you look at the map, you can see that there are a bunch of quests leading into the zone, and I wanted to do those on the way in. So I would need to get to Ratchet by taking a boat from Booty Bay, and it just so happens that I happened to get the Booty Bay flight point off camera. And well, after a few minutes of waiting on the boat to arrive, we were on our way to Ratchet. Now you might say that going this route is still a stupid idea since I've still got to run. Well, that's right, but if we're being realistic, the run only takes a few minutes, especially since we have aspect of the cheetah. And as we were entering into the zone, I came across an NPC called Stinky offering a quest, and well, it was an escort quest. So off me and Stinky went, killing lots of different wildlife as we went. Now I love escort quests, because it's like role-playing having a friend. I mean, imagine the quests we can go and he's running away. Well, with my new best friend gone and never to be seen again, I started moving deeper into the zone until I came across an NPC called Swampeye. Everyone around here has nicknames. I want one. So I grabbed my quest and then made my way to Theramore. So yeah, I guess I could have maybe just gotten the boat here all along. Once here, I went through all the normal procedures of collecting every quest in sight and making sure to collect the flight point, as I very often forget to do that and then regret it later. So I started off by running up the east coast, killing turtles in order to rip out their tongues, until I came across this little island. Now the island was absolutely swarming with murlocs, which usually would be a death trap. However, I need to kill those exact murlocs for my quest, and besides, I unleashed my world buffs and thought, what could possibly go wrong? And at first it was great. I was getting so much quest progression until I got a random message saying run. And I mean, that's pretty creepy as it is. And that's when two random rogues emerged from the sea and tried to attack me. Now I did my absolute best, using concussive shot to daze the first one and then using Gerald's charge to stun the other. And it looked like I was going to get away until a random murloc decided to change that. Well, I guess that's my bad for forgetting about the sea rogues, because bearing in mind, in that direction is nothing. Like literally, the only thing to the east of this island is water. Like, what are they doing? So I waved goodbye to my world buffs and swapped lair, and then finished off what I needed to do on the island, before heading over to the very northwest of Dustwallow to the spider area, where we needed to kill spiders and loot unpopped spider eyes. But apart from a few other people being here, this quest was completely fine. And that's when I had another look at my map, and I noticed that there was a few quests that had popped up. I don't know if I just wasn't high enough level when I got here or what, but that only made me more curious as to what they were. So I quickly turned in a quest to this ogre and made my way over there. But when I got here, there was no NPCs standing at the side of the road waiting for me, but instead the quests were coming from some random crap scattered across the floor. And well, all three of the quests wanted me to return to Theramore. So naturally, I did, but not before paying another visit to Swampeye to turn in a quest. And his follow-up quest was simply to give him a sword. And I remember doing this on my druid, and I remember the sword being quite expensive on the auction house, but I wanted to check just to make sure. And yeah, I'm not going to pay that much just for a little bit of XP. So instead, I turned in the quest that I had randomly picked up, which sent us all the way back to the west side of the zone, where I had to unexpectedly fight a very angry man, which was rather inconvenient because I had a trail of mobs behind me, and it was a pretty close call, but we managed to defeat the angry man and could return to Theramore to turn in the quest. And that was it. we had fully completed Dustwallow Marsh, apart from the stupid sword quest, but I think that's pretty reasonable. Now, even though we had all that progression, we still weren't level 37. What a predicament. So I once again decided to return to Scarlet Monastery. Now, I thought that we were so close to level 37 that a little library run will do just fine, since there's no point in doing an entire armory run. So we get to the end, and we slay Arcanus Dawn, and we were nowhere even close. And well, this group was actually going straight to armory, so I joined them. And we cleared through the long halls, and we get to Herod. And as we are killing him, we are just that close to level 37. I'm thinking, perfect, we'll kill Herod and that'll be us. Yeah, well, that wasn't the case. So off we go again. But this time we were going to Cathedral, a dungeon that we hadn't done yet on this character. Now, I don't think I did it on my warrior, but on my mage, this dungeon was so incredibly fun because we were able to clear the entire thing in like 3 pools, and it was just one of the coolest experiences I've had in World of Warcraft. However, with a hunter, a warrior, and a rogue, I don't think that'll be possible. So we casually cleared away every single mob in the dungeon just for the maximum possible experience gain. But unfortunately, we accidentally pulled rather large, which sadly wiped us. But we respawned and we moved into the Cathedral, where we pretty much have to kill everything inside, because once you tag the boss, every single mob that's left alive starts sprinting towards you, which is fantastic for spell cleave groups, but for us, not so much. So we kill High Inquisitor Fairbanks, who dropped us some dusty mail boots, thanks for that, and we can then move on to the final boss, Scarlet Commander Mograine. And he's actually quite an interesting one, because you kill him and you think, wow, we did it, woo. But then High Inquisitor Whitemane comes out to resurrect him, and then we absolutely destroy both of them together. Fantastic. And I don't think I realised just how slow leveling becomes, because again, I was a little bit disappointed with the amount of XP that we gained. But regardless, we did what we came here to do, which was to reach level 37. Now that we are level 37, it's once again time to think about where to go next. And well, I wanted to return to Stranglethorn Vale to do the quest down south, but unfortunately, that was not an option yet, because we just weren't high enough level. So I decided to go to everyone's favourite zone, Desolace. Now, getting there was a bit of a pain. We obviously hadn't gotten the flight point there yet, so I purchased myself a portal to Darnassus, and I then could catch a bird from there to Stonetalon Mountains, and could begin the lengthy run to Desolace, which is fine, because past level 20, you pretty much will never see Stonetalon again. And after a good 10 minutes of running, we had reached our destination in Desolace, where we did everything we normally do, like picking up the quests and running straight past the flight point. Like, honestly, I don't know how I do it sometimes. But first, I ran over to the west where I could turn any quest at a random box, and then immediately take that box back to Nigel's Point so that I could start the next part of the quest. So to start off the real quests, I first went over to the Burning Blade compound, which, if I'm not mistaken, are a cult involved with the Old Horde. I don't know if that's true, and actually I don't even know where I learned that. But we needed to find an NPC inside of one of the buildings. However, the room was just swarming with mobs, but they were all lower level than me, and we were just demolishing our way through them. So I turned in my quest with her, and we then had to go over to the building next door to collect her pendant. So I went over there and I met a little druid. So I invited him to join me and we could take down the mini boss together. And then it was back over to the other building to turn it in. Now, unfortunately, I didn't realize that the next part of the quest was an escort, and I accidentally started it without my little druid friend. However, he didn't seem to mind too much, and as a thanks for sticking around anyway, we both went back and we did the quest again. We then said our goodbyes and we could move on to doing our next quest. So I headed down to the eastern side of the zone where I could find all of these centaurs that I had to kill and steal their ears. And these must be some deaf-ass centaurs, man, because I was here for a while. So I got to 14 out of 15 ears collected, and I noticed on the map that there was another area further south that I could collect the final ear. And well, I needed to go there anyway, so I thought, why not? Let's just go there. Now, I'm still not sure that that was the greatest idea, because every time I killed one of these yellowish centaurs, I lost some reputation. So I'm hoping that that reputation does nothing, but I guess I'll just need to wait and find out. So I went down the hill a bit to this area tucked into the hills where I simply needed to kill a load of skeletons. And this wasn't just a small amount of them. I needed to kill 30. And I got all the way to the end of this trail and I managed to clear out every single skeleton, and I still hadn't completed the quest. And that's when I got an invite from a dwarf, and we went and we finished the quest together, and we managed to get it done nice and quickly. However, he still had a lot of progress to make on his quest, so I decided to leave him behind so that I could go work on something else. So I went over to this goblin NPC where I came across my druid friend from earlier, but this quest was a bit of a unique one. Usually quests are something like go slay wolves and then bring me back 15 of their toenails, but this felt a lot like a retail quest because we needed to find these aged kodos and then tame them and bring them back to the goblin. I'm not saying I dislike the quest, it's just different. But whilst we were here, we also needed to collect kodo bones, which would sometimes spawn a kodo apparition when you pick them up. Now, the follow-up quest I was a bit skeptical about because I remember attempting it on one of my other characters and getting absolutely obliterated. But we needed to go back to where we were murdering skeletons and place down a ghost magnet, which would obviously attract ghosts that we then needed to kill. Now, I'm not sure what was so hard the first time I tried it, because it really wasn't that bad. Maybe it was just the amount of mobs that I struggled with, but as a hunter, I feel like I could take on a small army. Next, I went over towards Maraudon, because I saw on the map that there was another random quest giver here. So obviously, I had to investigate. Turns out it was a little goblin that had clearly been captured by the centaurs. And this was another escort quest. Nice and easy, until we got to the very end part, where we just so happened to run into a patrol of centaurs. And well, my goblin died, which meant that I failed the quest. Well, that's unlucky, but not much I can do about it apart from restart the quest. So that's what I did. I went back to her cage and I patiently waited for her to respawn. Now, the second time was exactly the same, including the part where she walked straight into another patrol of centaur and died. Now, after failing it twice, I was not about to go and wait a third time, so I skipped that quest. So all that's left to do now is go to the west coast of the zone for a final few quests, which I was able to pick up from a crashed little boat. Now, this was a very easy quest. We needed to find a silver key and a gold key. The silver key I was able to pick up from these giant lobsters, and the golden key I got from these seamen. I then needed to make the excruciatingly long swim to an island off the west coast to turn in the keys. And all that was left now was to turn in the quest. And honestly, thank God that we're done with this zone, because if I'm totally honest, it's just not that fun. The quests are somewhat unique, but spending 3 hours looking at grey gets pretty tiring. On the plus side though, that did get us to level 38. When I logged on the following day, I was ready for Stranglethorn Vale. However, I didn't do that and decided that I would go back to Arathi. Not for the regular quests though, but for the elite quests. Because I realized recently that actually doing the elite quest is like doing an outdoors dungeon. At least in terms of XP anyway. Now, I managed to find myself a couple of guys to do it with, and whilst we were waiting for others to join us, I decided to go back to the east and attempt a quest that I failed last time, which was the hints of a new plague escort. And well, it was going perfectly this time. We managed to get to the mob that we needed to defeat, and that's when the Forsaken Patrol spawned directly on top of us. I mean, come on, what are the chances of that happening? So instead of dying, I decided to just run away and once again skip the quest, because my group was already over at the elite quest area and I wanted to go and meet up with them. Now, at the time, we didn't think that 3 of us would cut it for getting the quests done, but they also had a quest around here. So whilst we waited for more people, we decided to go and do that. They needed an arcane crystal thing that we could get from killing ogre shamans that were just around the corner. And well, half an hour later, we got their crystal things, but no one else had turned up to do the elite quest with us. So we decided that we would just give it a go anyway. I mean, what's the harm in that, right? So we began clearing our way into this building, which was just swarming with enemies. But after a good 10 minutes of carefully pulling and killing every mob, we were standing in front of the bosses that we needed to kill. So we went at them using every piece of crowd control that we could. Gerald was tanking a few mobs and we kept a fear up at all times, but in the end it just wasn't enough. However, it was just the boss left standing, meaning we could respawn and take him down without his annoying guards with him. And you know, I actually gained a lot more than I thought I would. We got almost half a level from that, so I would say that it was definitely worth it. It's time. It's finally time for Stranglethorn Vale. Now, I had already gone here previously and grabbed every single quest that I could, and that's why we are running from Duskwood, because we could just work our way down the entire zone and finish at Booty Bay by turning in all of the quests. Once here, I quickly stopped by this group of NPCs to pick up the last of the doable Curzon quests, since last time I wasn't high enough for it. I then quickly paid a visit to this group of explorers for their final quests, before proceeding with murdering crocodiles for some of their skin, which was nice and easy since we only needed 2 of it. I then moved south a little bit to where all of these trolls are, where we need to slay trolls for their ears. What is with this game and ripping off ears? Now, I don't think I've done this quest before, because every time I did come here, it was always swarming with hordes and hordes of horde. But this time it was being dominated by the Alliance, so we were able to smash our way through it. I then decided to head back up a little bit to the Curzon camp and enter into this house, where I turned in and picked up a quest from a small pile of books. I was then off to the back of the Curzon camp and into this cave to kill Curzon head shrinkers and Curzon commanders, and to turn in the quest that we picked up from the pile of books. So I then went back to the first group of NPCs to turn in the quest, and I actually never ended up doing their next quests. So instead, I went to the west to visit this small island where we needed to visit the island. Epic. I was then off to the east of Stranglethorn for a nice and simple quest of killing ventricle goblins for an item called Tumbled Crystal. I then went to do a quest that I remember all too well for some reason, and that's the Singing Crystal Shards. Now, I'm really not sure why I remember this quest so well, but I remember spending an insane amount of time trying to get this completed, because the item just never dropped. And well, it was the exact same this time. Luckily, right next to this quest was the Jungle Stalker Raptors that we needed to kill. Now, this quest was a little bit higher. However, some of the raptors were only level 40, so I kinda picked out those ones and we were able to get it done like that. And all that's left for this round of quests was, of course, to turn them in. Now, it wouldn't be a Stranglethorn Vale session if we didn't get jumped by a random group of horde. Now, at this point is when I decided to return to Stormwind to quickly update my abilities, because we were miles behind, before I once again returned to Stranglethorn Vale for another round of quests. So first up this time was gorilla killing, which was really as simple as it sounds. I then had to travel back north a bit to this river, where we once again had to murder crocodiles for some skin. I then had to return to the little island that we visited before, because I now had to kill water elementals that were roaming around. Now, originally I wasn't sure if I should go up here, because I know for a fact that this is a pretty popular farming spot for max levels, since these guys can drop elemental water, which is due to spike in price once Nax comes out. But apart from me and one other leveler, it was completely fine. Now, the next quest was a very tedious quest, because we needed to collect troll tusks. Now, the way I think you're supposed to do this quest is by going inside the camps and taking them out there. However, all the mobs in there were just too high for me. However, on the outskirts, there were a few mobs placed around that were just perfect level for me. So I spent like 30 minutes running around killing these loose mobs. And well, I was minding my own business killing my mobs when I happened to notice that there was a rogue running around behind me. So I decided to place a flare on top of me, and the absolute stupidity of this rogue was incredible. He ran directly into the flare, and using Gerald's stun, we were able to get our distance from him, and we absolutely stomped him. Nothing makes me more happy than ruining a rogue's day, apart from maybe getting the Drakefang Talisman trinket, but I haven't gotten that yet, so I don't know if the feeling is comparable. But after eventually getting all the tusks that we needed, I began moving south again so that I could attempt the Singing Blue Crystal quest. Now, this might be the most infuriating quest I have ever done. The mobs are so tightly packed that you could never just pull one at a time. They hit extremely hard, and to top that off, the item never friggin' drops. But I gave it my best go, but in the end, I decided it was just too hard and was taking too long to get done. Now at this point, we were very close to level 40, and I decided that a little dungeon run would get us there. So I returned to Scarlet Monastery. Nah, I'm just kidding, I went to Razorfen Downs. Now I don't know what it is with this dungeon, but every single character I've made so far has ended up running this dungeon at least a couple times. And it's not like I really enjoy the dungeon or anything. It just seems to be in the perfect level range for when I run out of things to do. So the first boss is Tutankhamun. He's a big spider guy, and he did drop the very nice chest piece for the tank. We then made our way over to this quest giver to start the escort quest, which I missed because I'm just an idiot. Now whilst we were waiting for this guy to do his thing, it's worth noting that there really isn't much loot in here for us. There is the flesh hide shoulders, which I already said to the rogue he can have if they drop, and besides, the one I had already were kinda just better for us anyway. But the other item is the swine fists, which is not a massive upgrade by any means, but it would give us a slight agility increase, and as a hunter, what else can I ask for? And the boss from the escort quest does actually drop them for us, so not massive, but it's at least something. Now right after this, the tank said that he needed to leave, and that was kind of a gut punch for me, because we literally only needed 5k XP to reach level 40, but luckily as a group we decided to continue clearing the dungeon as 4 until we could get another tank, which I gotta say was not as bad as I thought it would be. We even managed to kill Mordresh as a group of 4, but lucky for us we were able to get another tank relatively quickly, and we could then take on Glutton, who unfortunately did not drop the shoulders for the rogue. And not long after, we hit level 40, so we quickly finished up here by taking down Amnanar. So level 40 is one of the biggest milestones in anyone's leveling journey, because we now unlock dual specking. But not only that, but we can purchase our first mount. So excitedly, I made my way over to Darnassus. Now on my first night elf, I chose the spotted frost saber, and just to spice it up a bit this time, I went for the striped night saber. And with that done and done, we had achieved our goal for today. Last time was a very big video because we managed to achieve one of, if not the most important milestone in any leveling journey. We explored through Dustwallow Marsh and Desolace, and of course ran Scarlet Monastery way more times than we probably should have, and we ended it all with a little run of Razorfen Downs. Doing that allowed us to get level 40 and purchase our first mount, who still needs a name by the way. But for today, I will set the simple goal of reaching level 48. So I'll be totally honest, this is a part of the leveling journey that I just wasn't looking forward to, because on all of my previous characters, going from level 40 to 45, I always seem to run out of things to do. I mean, that might just be me and my horrible habit of leaving zones early, but surely it can't be this bad. So I picked out of the very few zones that I still had left to quest in, and I went with the Badlands. So I have mixed opinions about the Badlands. To me, it feels kind of unfinished. Like, there should be more to this zone, but there just isn't. So to start this zone off, I quickly stopped by this small pit in the ground. We needed to clear out a load of Shadowforged dwarves before picking up a note from the floor, which we had to return to a couple of prospectors just up the hill, and they offered us the bulk of the quests from this zone. So the first on that short list is to retrieve Rydal's lucky pick, and you know, every time I've done this quest before, it was a couple mobs and that was it done. However, this time was not the same, because I went back to the pit and cleared out every mob there, and then had to go up to the fortress and cleared out every mob there as well. And what should have taken a few minutes actually took 15. I then went to the very northeast of the zone to pick up a supply crate, which we were able to just grab and get out since someone had just cleared all of the mobs that spawn around it. So I returned to Rydal to turn in the quests, and in perfect WoW Classic fashion, sent us right back to where we just came from. We needed to slay some ogres and collect scrap metal, so I cleared out every single ogre in the area, and even then, I still only collected 5 out of the 7 that we needed, but nothing a quick layer swap can't fix. So I turned that in, and well, these two didn't seem to offer me anything else for the zone, so I started moving further into the Badlands, and along the way I picked up a quest that wanted buzzard wings, and the buzzards didn't really spawn in any specific location and was more something that I could passively do as we did other things. And the only other NPC in the zone offering quests was this little gnome, and he wanted small stone shards, but he also wanted frost oil, and given the price of frost oil currently, I wasn't going to pay for that. So instead, I began murdering some elementals. Now usually, this quest is very heavily contested, so when I saw tens of them roaming around, I was quite pleased. But very quickly, there was a party of horde and no more elementals to slay. I even swapped lair and once again was greeted with a party of horde, so instead I decided to just run around and kill some buzzards. But again, I was just really struggling to find any. There was just too many people here for my liking, so I decided to leave the zone, since I thought I could maybe come back at night since it would be quieter at that time. Now if you look at the map, you might say that I'm being a bit dramatic, since there seems to be loads of quests here. Well yeah, but those are all for the Uldaman dungeon, which I would actually be down to do at some point, but we weren't high enough yet. So for now, I hearthed my way back to Stormwind and started thinking about where to go next. So since I was already here, I decided to do a quick bag clear and turn in the Razorfen Downs quest, which gave us this lovely Vanquisher's sword, which would give us plus 28 attack power, which is quite good. So to accompany that, I decided to purchase myself a sword by the name of the Butcher, before I hopped on a bird and began making my way over to Arathi, for like the 4th time now. And just like in the last video, I decided to attempt the escort quest for hints of a new plague. And you'll never believe it, but this time we didn't get swarmed by orcs and the Forsaken Patrol didn't spawn directly on top of us. And we were able to get to and slay Apothecary Jorel without any issues at all. So 2 videos ago, I mentioned that I remembered there being quests to the northeast of this zone. Well, I found them. Turns out they are part of the Princess questline, and what we needed to do was kill these kobolds and loot a moat of Mizrael, and this was an annoying quest. First of all, it would help if they dropped the bloody thing, but not only that, this quest was very contested from both Horde and Alliance. So I spent a good 40-ish minutes just running in and out of this cave, swapping layers as I went until I was finally able to get everything that I needed. So I went to turn in the quest, which I first had to clear out some water elementals, and then got killed by a max level player. I always wonder what goes through people's heads that kill players half their level. Like surely they don't think they're good at the game, right? But the follow-up quest, we needed to obtain 3 different keys, which we could get from stones surrounded by different kinds of elementals. So I collected all 3 and I turned it in. And unfortunately, the follow-up quest was an elite quest, so I skipped over it for now, and instead went over to this ogre-filled cave. Quite simply, we needed to venture all the way into the deepest part of the cave and locate an ogre mini-boss, Korgresh Coldrage. We take him down and we are able to get our quest item, the Wand of Invocation. I then had a little look at my map again, and I noticed some quests that I hadn't seen before. I mean, they looked like they weren't even on the map, and that intrigued me, so I ran up and down trying to find a way over to these quests, and turns out we had to go all the way behind Stormguard Keep, and I don't know, something about this little section felt special. Like, I'm not sure how to describe it, but I made my way through, and I was greeted with a large docked ship, and something about this part was cool, man, I don't know, but turns out 2 of their other ships had crashed into the reef, but it's not just reefs, and we needed to explore what it actually was. But first was a quick quest where we need to escort and protect a goblin NPC whilst he did something. Now, subscribers of the channel will know just how much I hate water quests. I just don't like them. You're slow, you drown, and I can't ever tell how far away something actually is to me. Luckily though, I did come across a friendly warlock who granted me 10 minutes of water breathing, so we better make the most of it, right? And I suppose this wasn't too bad. We had to kill a load of Naga and then loot elven gems. Simple. However, the other quest here was just not as simple. We needed to dive into these sunken ships and collect some paper, which wouldn't be too bad if I could A, see, and B, breathe, and it was just annoying and quite fidgety. But after a good 20 minutes, we were able to get that done and could now turn in the quests. And sadly, that was it for Arathi. Like truly this time, we are done with it. However, I did have a quest to turn in at South Shore, so I decided to do that and I could then head over and into Alterac Mountains. Once we had landed in South Shore, I turned in the previously mentioned quest and accepted whatever I could for Alterac Mountains. I then went AFK on a chair for 10 minutes, so before we went into Alterac, I decided to stop and do the only quest I had left for Hillsbrad, which ended up being a complete waste of time, because the mobs were grey, meaning I got no XP, and I didn't even finish the quest, which means I got no XP. So I moved into Alterac itself and began with slaying some syndicate mobs. Now Alterac is a weird zone for me, because I feel like it almost blends in with Hillsbrad, and is another zone that I feel like could have a lot more done with it. Whilst I was here though, I came across a Warrock that was obviously here to do the same quest as me, so we teamed up to do it together. And this was quite the simple quest. We just needed to kill shadow mages and also collect Alterac signet rings off of their corpses. So we spent quite a while actually running in and out of these small rundown buildings, and we took down a mini boss Baron Vardus for a quest that I wasn't on, but doing that got everything we needed. We then said our goodbyes and we ran in the opposite direction. I went off a bit to where all of these ogres are running around to collect dirty knucklebones, whatever that is, and I gotta say, this part of Alterac specifically feels like you're high up in the mountains. I know Dunmorrow technically is, but it doesn't have the same feeling. I just really like this area. I then ran to the very back of Alterac, which was a fantastically crafted hilly area, and again, I just feel like there could have been more done with it. I needed to collect the head of Nagas, which unfortunately I just witnessed being killed, so I had to wait for him to respawn. And while I was clearing out the house that was there just for the sake of it, and I noticed that a shaman was killing the newly spawned Nagas. So I'm sorry Voltjin, it just had to be done. But don't worry my friend, I will finish off the kill for you. What a good citizen I am. With nothing else left for me here, I returned to South Shore and turned in the quests. And unfortunately, this was a pretty big wall, because there was literally nothing else for me to do. There was some stuff in Stranglethorn Vale, but for the bulk of the quests, I would need one more level. So I thought that since we are now level 41, Alderman would be perfect for us. So I returned to the Badlands and grabbed every quest I could for the dungeon, and I made my way over to the entrance, and I waited and waited. And well, after sitting outside the dungeon like a lost puppy for 30 minutes, I unfortunately gave up, which means I've only got one more option left for leveling: Scarlet Monastery. And at this point, I was honestly so sick of Scarlet Monastery, and the only one I could stomach anymore was Cathedral, and we were relatively close to level 42, so I just kind of hoped that it would be enough. But we get to the end, and we just aren't quite there. I really didn't want to do it again, so I thought, screw it, we will get the rest in Stranglethorn Vale. So first off, I went to finish a quest that I couldn't last time due to levels, and this was another really annoying one, because we needed to collect 2 pieces of paper, which doesn't sound too hard, except they were located right in the middle of a giant ring of mobs, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to just pull one of them at a time, and these guys hit hard. But after countless attempts and deaths, eventually Gerald volunteered against his will to be a sacrifice, and I was able to collect my quest item, and we could move on to something else. And I went with the Akira's Reed quest. Very simply, we needed to roam around this area and kill some Naga, and they might drop the item we need, which really wasn't too bad, apart from the fact that it took me half an hour to complete. Now after this, I actually was done with Stranglethorn Vale. The only quest I had left was the Singing Crystal Shard quest, which I stated last time I absolutely hated. So I now had literally one option left, and that was to grind out Scarlet Monastery or Razorfen Downs until I was level 45. So that's what I did. I hopped back into Scarlet Monastery Armory, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. We had already done it like 20 times, and I really just wanted to go to a fresh, new zone and explore until I couldn't anymore. So after our armory, I once again went into Cathedral, and after those 2 runs, we just didn't really get that much XP, and well, I just ended up logging off for the day. But when I logged on the following day, something very mysterious happened. Something unexplainable. We had somehow leveled to 45 overnight. How could this happen? Such mysteriousness. A blessing from Sargeras himself. But I wasn't going to waste this blessing. I was going to use it to its fullest potential. So I headed straight for Tanaris. But in all seriousness, now that we were level 45, mysteriously, I was motivated to play again. I was excited to have so much to do. Now I knew that Zul'Farrak wasn't too far away, so I quickly made a stop at the Mirage Raceway to pick up what is probably the most important quest yet, the Gazrilla quest, which would reward us with a trinket that would increase mount speed by 3%. No other item in the game does something like that apart from the gloves enchant, so getting it would be one of my top priorities. Obviously, first step is to feed Gerald and get started with killing. I decided to start off with the Waste Wander quests, having us kill bandits and thieves and also collecting water pouches. Now I don't know about you, but I really like Tanaris, which is strange because it's literally just a desert. There's nothing massively special about it, but still, I've always really enjoyed questing here. Maybe it's the variety of different enemies or something, I'm really not sure. But whilst I was here, I also happened to come across Caliph's Scorpid Sting, a mini boss that was always a pain in the ass to find. But since I was solo, I had to quickly nuke down Scorpid Sting himself before inevitably falling over to the ads that he comes with. I then went over to the west to quickly do the Water Survey quest, and I remember that last time I did it, a bunch of high level mobs spawned on top of me. So using that knowledge, I was able to get a head start and run away from the mobs. I then made a quick stop at Gadgetzan to turn in the quest so that I could get started with the next part of the Waste Wander quests. Now the entire time that I had been working on my quests, I had myself listed on the LFG tool for a run of Zul'Farrak, and as I was getting started on my next quest, that's when I got my invite. So I halted what I was doing and I made my way over to the dungeon entrance. Now I love Zul'Farrak. It feels like the end of the mid-game dungeons, but not only that, the XP for a single run is pretty good, especially if you decide to do all of the graveyards, which this group actually decided to do after taking out Witch Doctor Zumra. And after we did that, we moved on to doing the hardest part of the entire dungeon, which is of course the stairs, where basically we get swarmed with hundreds of mobs for a few minutes, and to be honest, you just gotta let the mage do mage things here. And lastly, we move up towards the final boss, Ukor's Sandskull. Now unfortunately, we weren't able to go and kill Gazrilla for our trinket quest since no one in this group had the mallet to spawn him in. So I listed myself back on the LFG tool and made my way back into Tanaris. So I quickly went back and I finished up the Waste Wander quests before heading over to the very east beach for the pirate quests. Now originally, I wasn't sure if that was a great idea because this place is always very contested from both factions, and that's probably just because of how long the quests here take to complete. But we needed to kill a load of different kinds of pirates, so before I had to move into the compound itself, I spent as long as I could on the outskirts, and well, we managed to get into another Zul'Farrak group, so I quickly finished off every mob outside of the compound and once again made my way over to Zul'Farrak. And yeah, I forgot to hit record, but it's not that big of a deal really. Our run was pretty much the same as the last time. However, I did record the most important part, which was the Gazrilla part, because someone in this group actually had the mallet. But before that, we obviously had to clear out the area because there were a lot of loose mobs running around. But after we had done that, we hit the gong thing and the Gazrilla menacingly makes his way out of the water. Now I've only ever done this boss as a melee DPS, which means I always had to worry about the massive knock-up ability that he does. So it was nice this time to just sit back and watch my allies getting thrown in the air. But we get him down and we can loot our lovely quest item. So before I headed back into Tanaris to finish things off, I wasted no time in turning in our trinket quest quest. Now I know that 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but I remember a while back someone explained the math to me and it was something like you get there 45% faster when you have the trinket equipped. Not sure if that's true, but regardless, it's an essential item for any character to have. So of course, I once again returned to the pirate compound, and I started off by clearing out this small house, which was great because it was completely uncontested, and doing that gave us a good amount of progression on the kill quests, but also allowed us to get the Stoli shipment quest done. And the next 30 minutes was literally nothing but running around killing different pirates and looting their hats. That was until I was mostly done, but I still needed Firebeard's head. And well, I don't have friends, so I asked a nearby rogue if he would like to do it together. But he had already done it, but he offered to help me anyway. Our plan was to nuke the boss down and then run away. But by the might of Gerald himself, we were able to get them all down a lot easier than both of us expected. So thank you, Mecrazom, you have helped me a ton. All that was left to do now was to turn in the quests. Now I know that there are still a lot of quests to do here, but hear me out. They are too high for me currently, and I promise we will come back this time. But before I left, I decided to have one more run of Zul'Farrak. Not for loot, but just for XP. And man, this was an XP run and a half, because we were killing everything and anything. We even went all the way behind Gazrilla and killed random mobs that I didn't even know were there. But I'm not complaining, free XP is free XP. Now since that we are done with Tanaris now, I decided to go to another one of my favourite zones. If you know me, I love the natural green zones. Trees, water, giant gorillas that want to stomp you into a pile of mush. I love it all. But obviously, we don't have the flight point yet. So I purchased myself a portal to Darnassus, and I could then catch a bird to Desolace. Now I do quite like travelling from one zone to another. I get to see the zones that I previously leveled in. However, Desolace is just not it. I just wanted to get into Feralis as quick as possible, and taking those first few steps into the zone, I knew that I was going to have a lot of fun here. The transition from a grey desert into a beautiful, lush jungle is quite dramatic. So I took myself down the zone and patiently waited for the boat to arrive and take me to Featherboon Stronghold. So once here, we went through all the normal stuff, collecting quests and getting started. I wanted to first stick to the quests that were on the island, so I had to visit these ruins and take a quest back to the original NPC, which then took us on a journey of Naga killing. So since we were just alone in this island, I thought that this would be the perfect time to unboon my buffs that I had gathered on my journey around the world. And well, I definitely don't regret that decision, because we were just an absolute machine. Pair my world buffs with the fact that the mobs were lower level than me, we were like 3-shotting every mob. I then turned that quest in and then had to venture to the very back island and into a cave. And there was a couple other people here, so obviously I invited them to join my group, but they declined. So I stole the mini-boss from them. But with that now done, it was time to move to the mainland of Feralis. So off I went on the boat once more, and we had a pretty decent chunk of stuff to get done. So I started with killing water elementals, and of course the very strange quest where we have to shrink down giants and then kill them. And they were a little bit high for us, but you know, the hunter. And after a good 15 minutes of running up the west coast, killing basically anything that came into my line of sight, we hit level 47, which means only one more level to go. And well, I had slaughtered basically everything up at the northern side, so I began moving south a bit, which was convenient since I had a quest to turn in down there anyway. And the other thing that was down here was actually one of the Tanaris quests. We had to kill rogue Veil Screechers and then use an item on their body and collect their spirit. I then found the random quest that I had down here, which turned out to be a crashed rowboat. And I did think about returning to Feathermoon again to turn in, but to be honest, I liked looking at my quest log and seeing nothing but quest complete. So instead, I ventured further into the zone until I came across the Feral Scar Yetis. And this was a very simple quest. Kill the Yetis and steal their hide. And I know that skinners actually get quest items from skinning. It's a shame I'm not a skinner then. I then headed over to the Gorduni Ogre area. And this was a quest that I wasn't looking forward to, since I know for a fact that the shamans never spawned. So I made sure to prioritize them first, and I think I got it done in record time. All that was left now was to return to Feathermoon Stronghold to turn in. And what did I tell you? Isn't that just a beautiful sight? Now for the second round of quests, we definitely didn't have as much to do this time, but to start it off, I went north and into this Yeti infested cave, and this was practically the exact same as the first Yeti quest: kill Yetis and take their hide. Now that was all of the Feathermoon quest completed, so I decided to venture deeper into the zone until I came across a couple of Night Elf NPCs who wanted to free the Sprite Darters, and there was a lot of these mobs, but since we had the help of the NPCs, it actually wasn't too bad. We could then unlock the door and set the little dragon freaks free, and the follow-up quest wanted us to run around and slay more of the Grim Totem, because if killing them and releasing their cargo wasn't enough, the Night Elves now just wanted to slaughter them for fun. And to be fair, so did I. And the follow-up quest wanted me to go to Darnassus, but I wasn't about to do that right now, and instead moved further into the zone, until I came across the bug hive that we needed to go inside of and turn in the quest. And well, that was it. Our quest log was filled with nothing but quest completed text. So I returned to Feathermoon for one last time to turn in, and I even went all the way to Darnassus to turn in the quest that I had picked up earlier. And well, once that was done, we were so close to level 48 that I thought it would just be a bit of a waste to start a new zone. So I ended up calling it a day and logging in. Last time we had to go through what is probably the most miserable part of leveling a character in WoW Classic, which is going from levels 40 to 45, constantly running out of things to do and being forced to spam dungeons that we'd already done tens of times. However, by the might of Gerald himself, we were mysteriously gifted, because when I logged on, I was shocked to find that my character had gotten to level 45 overnight. How mysterious. So I took that blessing and I powered my way through Tanaris and Feralis, and of course managed to obtain my carrot on a stick from Zul'Farrak. But with all of that nonsense out of the way, it's time for us to start making our final push to level 60, which is why the goal for today is to get to level 55. But before all of that, we have something important to attend to. We must appoint a name to my mount. And well, you guys came up with some very good ones, so that's why I would like to introduce you all to Harold. Logging on for the day, we were sitting at a very comfortable almost level 48, and we had so many leveling options, so many different zones, but also having a couple of dungeons at my disposal. And I know that I still have some stuff left in Tanaris, and I did say that I would go back, but not right now, as I decided to go to the hinterlands. So I took myself over to South Shore and began making that very short run. Even when we were taking our first steps into the zone, I was quite surprised. Is it just me, or is this zone extra, I don't know, bushy? So I made my way up to Airy Peak, and would you believe I actually grabbed the flight point this time? And I know there isn't a massive amount of quests here, as there was a grand total of 3, but XP is XP. Now I gotta say, but I don't remember this zone looking so good. In my head I remembered it being slightly grey, but it's actually a fantastic woodland style zone, and this honestly might have became one of my favourite zones aesthetically. But for our first quest, we needed to obtain 5 troll tribal necklaces, which obviously drop from the troll mobs located around the zone. And well, I had something else to do at this part anyway, so I cleared out every single troll. The other thing that I had here was to check cages, which if you just used your eyes, you can quite clearly see has nothing inside. I then went to the very center of the zone where I found another troll infested camp, and I cleared out that one as well before locating the third and final cage, which you can still see through. I then moved to the east of the zone for our third and final quest, which was to kill some slimes, the perfect quest for a fantasy RPG game. Now this one was quite difficult because we needed 10 green sludge but also 10 jade oozes, and there were hundreds of the green sludges running around but only a couple of jade oozes. So I cleared out every single one and then moved to the north where I was able to find another massive group of slimes, and I just so happened to notice that there was a chest way off in the back, and me being the massive loot goblin that I am, I wanted to see what was inside. So I cleared out all the mobs, which was great since I got another of the 3 jade oozes done. I then opened up the chest and it had a weapon called Gutbuster inside. What is with this character and finding amazing guns? Now I didn't immediately equip it because I wanted to check the price of it on the auction house first. And I know that I have an add-on that does tell me, but sometimes it is very inaccurate. So I quickly logged on to Cat and it was 25 gold. Definitely not a bad price, but to be honest, I kinda wanted to use a bow, since a night elf using a gun just doesn't sound or look right, so I just held on to it for now. So I quickly finished Slime Murder and returned to Airy Peak to turn in, and we were only given one quest after the initial ones, which was to search the Altar of Zul. So I took myself over there only to find two big scary elite mobs. However, there was a gnome here who was trying to get the mallet for Zul'Farrak, so we teamed up and we attempted it together. And at first we weren't sure if 2 people was going to be enough. However, Gerald is of course the single strongest being in the known universe, and we were able to take down the first elite mob and then run away. And then it was a simple case of doing the same thing for the second mob. And of course, doing that allowed us to get the sacred mallet. So I decided to stick around with the gnome for a bit and get the mallet for myself. So me and the gnome found ourselves a pet rogue and we all went over to the Altar of Zul, which was swarming with elite mobs. And we started by trying to sneak around the mobs and pulling only select ones at a time, but eventually we just decided to hop on our mounts and beeline it for the altar. But when we got here, there was actually a party of Horde that had just finished clearing everything out, which was great for us, and they didn't even attack us. We all just claimed our mallet, and we could then make our grand escape by falling over a waterfall. So a bit of a detour, but it did get us a little extra chunk of XP, so I think it was worth it. Now the follow-up quest wanted me to go to the Blasted Lands. However, I didn't want to do that, and the quest after the Blasted Lands quest would be too high for me anyway. So instead, I opened my map and began thinking about where to go next. But before that, I had to do something with this gun that I had found. So I was browsing the auction house and I found this bow. Now at the time, my thought process was purple costing 20 gold. This would be awesome. So I purchased it and then I listed my gun and then made my way back over to Tanaris, and I started off by visiting this goblin NPC to turn in and accept another quest. And I then headed over to the Dune Mall Ogre area, and I realized almost immediately my very big mistake. While the bow was cool and all, it was extremely fast, which is not good because we run out of arrows way too quickly and it messes with the scaling of the abilities or something like that. Point is, our DPS had significantly fallen because of it, but I just thought that since we had a bag full of arrows, I would just quest through Tanaris with the bow and we could then come up with a solution later. So the Dune Mall quests really weren't anything special, murder some ogres, but we also had to kill a mini-boss called Gormorok the Ravager, who also really wasn't anything special. And since I was here, I went over to the bug hives to kill bugs and collect centipar insect parts. Now if you asked me a couple months ago, I would probably say that this is quite cool. However, since farming for both Earthstrike and Might of Cenarius and running AQ40 every single week, the bug theme is starting to wear out just a little. But after that, I went down to the very southwest area where we needed to slay some living mutant plants, and obviously we were doing it for XP but also for Noggin Fogger, because is your character really complete if you don't have Noggin Fogger? And whilst I was here, I grouped up with a fellow hunter, and weirdly he had made the exact same mistake with the bow that I had. Glad to know that all hunters have room temperature IQ. So we finished up plant killing together, and then we patiently waited for a turtle, apparently for some escort quest that I had no idea about. But after waiting for a while, we both decided to go our separate ways. Now one of the few quests that I still had to complete was to gather 30 Gazridian ornaments, little artifacts that were buried in the sand, and these were pretty much everywhere all over the zone. However, looking at my map, I saw that there seemed to be a small part with loads of them spawning next to each other. So obviously, I went there, and it was the ruins of some building that was surrounded by ogres. So I killed those ogres, mainly just for some extra XP, and I was able to get every single artifact that we needed. So my quest log was pretty much completed at this point. However, there was one quest left, and that was the chicken escort quest. And if I'm not mistaken, after this escort quest, we then needed to escort the chicken in the hinterlands. So my thought process was to complete this first part and then take the 2 quests that I had back to the hinterlands. However, 4 quest mobs spawned to attack us, and there was loose mobs getting pulled, and sadly, my chicken died. Well, that's no big big deal, I can just restart it. So I quickly returned to Gadgetzan to turn in, and I deleted the chicken item by mistake. I even went and had a look at item restoration, and sadly, I don't think you can restore quest items. So I just had to continue with my second round of quest, which was just the one. We had to venture into one of the bug hives and find someone's surveying gear. And instead of actually pulling and killing the mobs, I decided to just run through them and then feign death before I died. And I think I might have developed some kind of trauma with these hives. Even the look of this thing sent shivers down my spine. The thought of having to mindlessly farm out these Silithus combat quests sends fear throughout my entire body like no other. So after taking the long entrance like an idiot into the hive, I was able to locate what we needed and could now feign death my way out again, and then turn in the quest. And after that, we were done. For now. We might come back later, but I don't know yet. But for now, it was time to find somewhere else to explore for a while. And what better place than Searing Gorge? So obviously, I didn't have the flight point there yet, so I flew to Lochmoden and went through the Badlands. Actually, I don't know if there is any other entrance to Searing Gorge. Now, entering the zone, I know that there were some quests to our left, but I decided to go past them for now and get to Thorium Point first, mainly because I feared that I would forget about the flight point. Now once I had done that, I was actually going to go straight back to those other quests that we passed, since they were lower level than the Thorium Point ones. However, I got a message from a person asking if I wanted to do the elite quests. Well, I probably wouldn't get any better opportunity to do them, so of course I joined them. We made our way inside of the giant cave, and the place was filled with dark iron taskmasters and slavers, which was alright because we actually did need to kill a big chunk of them for another one of the regular quests. So we cleared through all of those for a good 10 minutes until we found Overseer Maltorius, and since there was 3 of us, we were able to nuke him down pretty quickly, at the expense of Gerald of course. We could then pick up the piece of paper that was sat on the bench, and that was the elite quests done. And we were making our way out, and well, we all had the Incendosaurus quest, so we decided to jump down and do that whilst we were here, which was an incredibly easy quest. Run around and killed 20 Incendosaurs, which is quite a few to be fair, but the respawn rate on these things is insanely fast for whatever reason. The other thing that we had to do here was hop down to the very bottom and kill fire elementals for Heart of Fire and golems for Golem Oil, and apart from that taking a while, it was completely fine. We then made our way back up top and finished off slaying the war golems. We also attempted to loot the smithing tire, I think that's how it's pronounced, but after running around aimlessly for 10 minutes, we decided to do a quick turn in. And at this point it was getting quite late, so I said thank you to my friends and I logged out for the day. But when I logged back on the following day, I wasted no time and got to work on the only quest left in my quest log, which was to get the stupid tire thing. And let me tell you, this quest is broken, because there's only about 4 mobs that can drop it, and the thing just never wanted to drop. So I ran around for 15 minutes and nothing. That was until I saw in the chat that someone wanted to do the other elite quest that was here. We needed to go into this little cave that was once again swarming with elite mobs. Since there was only 2 of us though, it was actually quite difficult, but at the expense of Gerald's life about 8 times, we were able to get that done. So I returned to the quest giver and he began to conjure a torch thingy. But before I did that quest, I returned to the smithing guys again for another 15 minutes, and once again, no tire. Now the torch quest was actually an elite quest. However, with the help of Gerald distracting the elite mob, I could just sneak past and do what I needed to do. So I went back to the torch guy to turn in, and then made my way back over to the southeast to get started on those quests that I skipped earlier. And strangely, the quests were coming from an outhouse looking thing. Turns out the Dark Iron had locked someone inside and we needed to teach those Dark Iron a lesson. And the other thing we had here was to escort a dwarf back to Ironforge. And we ended up getting swarmed multiple times by mobs, but thanks to Gerald and his infinite reservoir of power, they were no match for us. And not long after, our dwarf gets sniped from a rock. Quite sad actually. But all I could do now was return to murdering those geologists. And I did kill all of the ones that we needed, but unfortunately to turn it in, we needed to get silk cloth, which I didn't have. So I kept hold of the quest for now, and maybe we could come back later. And the only quest left now was that stupid smithing thing. And I'm not even kidding, I ran back and forth here for over an hour and a half. And honestly, you should have heard the sigh of release when it finally dropped. With Searing Gorge now finished and completed, mostly, I kinda ran into the same issue that I did last time, where I didn't have any zone to go to. I mean, there was a couple of loose quests lying around, but I wanted somewhere where I could get a nice big chunk of XP and reach level 51, and what better place than Maraudon. But before I did that, I made a quick stop in the hinterlands to complete the next part of the Noggenfogger chain. We simply needed to jump into this small pond and pick up a mushroom. I could then return to Tanaris and turn in the quest, and now I could buy as much Noggenfogger as I could possibly carry, which I didn't do, and instead went to Theramore to pick up one of the Maraudon quests, and then went to Desolace to do the same thing. And with my quest log now filled up with dungeon quests, it was time to actually run the dungeon itself. And I don't remember Maraudon ever being so difficult to find a group for, because I waited for a while, and in the end I wasn't even able to find a quest run and had to settle for what is known as a princess run. So we all made our way down and took the portal inside. So Maraudon is easily one of, if not my favourite dungeon in the entire game. This place looks phenomenal. Every section of this place brings those bright fluorescent colours, and the dungeon is so big, it's like its own little mini zone. And apart from the fact that Maraudon is completely taken over by the Mafia now, you can still farm some pretty solid gold by farming elemental earth and ghost mushrooms. Plus, if you're lucky enough, you can get some epics such as the Edgemaster's handguards, which can go as high as 1,000 gold each. Now pair all that with the fact that there is 9 bosses, all of which hold some pretty sick hunter loot. However, we will talk about that later, because for now we are in a princess run, which means we skip over every boss in the dungeon and only go for the last one, Princess Theridras, aka your mum. Now people do this mainly so that warriors can get their first piece of pre-base loot, which is of course the Blackstone Ring. We are doing it for XP of course, but also because I quite like the bracers of the Stone Princess, a very nice bracer that should be uncontested by other players. And since we are a hunter, we are quite valuable for this fight, mainly due to Princess's Fart Cloud mechanic, which deals quite a lot of AoE damage to players close by. But we do get her down, and sadly, no ring or bracer. But we got a little chunk of XP, so that's at least something. And since we are right here, we also decided to jump down into the water and kill Rotgrip. Now he doesn't hold nearly as much loot as Princess, but he does have the chance to drop a fantastic pair of boots, the albino croc scale boots. Offering 20 agility, there is very little other pieces of gear that come even close to being this good for us. So we get him down, and sadly, no boots. And afterwards, I returned to Nigel's Point to turn in the Kill Princess quest, where I was able to get myself a very nice bow. Now I don't think it's better than my Gutbuster gun that I found, but like I said, a night elf using a gun just doesn't seem right. So I decided to switch to the bow instead, which is also quite important for another piece of gear that we might be able to get inside of Maraudon. So once again, I patiently waited for a quest run, but sadly I could only get a princess run. However, this time no one had the Scepter of Celebris, meaning we had to enter through the purple portal, which is great for us since there would be more mobs, and more mobs means more XP. But it's also good because of the boss Lord Viletongue, because he can drop the Infernal Trickster leggings, which would give us 20 agility, but also +4 to bows, which if you haven't figured out, that's why I wanted to use the bow that we got. But we get him down, and sadly, no legs. We also decided to take down Celebris the Cursed, but sadly we did not have the quest for him since we hadn't gone over to the orange side yet. But we then jumped down the waterfall and we are back to where we started on the first run, and we clear through the small amount of mobs down to Princess, and I gotta say, our tank on this run was unbelievably good. Like genuinely, I don't think I've seen a tank as good at this level. But we get Princess down, and again, sadly, no ring or bracers. We then jump down again to take down Rotgrip, and once again, no boots. However, I am told this axe is quite good for leveling a warrior. And you'll never guess what I did after this run. Yup, another princess run. So we take her down, and no bracers. Jump down to Rotgrip, no boots. And in case you haven't seen my raiding videos, this is usually how my loot luck goes. Fortunately though, this group decided that they wanted to do another run, so of course I stayed. So we get to Princess, and we DPS her down, and this time she did actually drop the Blackstone ring. Now here's the thing about the ring. Yes, it would be insanely good for us. But it's not pre-base, and to be honest, I would just feel bad if I was to steal it from the warrior or the rogue. So I ended up just passing it to them. So once again, we jumped down to Rot Grip, and well, the boots dropped, which I most definitely was not going to pass on, and we won it. Definitely the best one we've had so far loot-wise, but obviously doing this over and over again, it gets very repetitive, and to be honest, we'd only gotten like half of a level, so I decided to take a little break and head over to Azshara. Azshara is a bit of a weird one. The zone both looks and feels amazing to quest in, however, there is only 2 quests. Now I know that there are some repeatable quests, but honestly, I'm not sure if those are really worth doing. The first quest we had to do was kill 6 apparitions and 6 lichlings, which was as easy as it sounds. Run around a bit and kill spirits. Easy done. However, the next quest was a massive pain in the ass. We needed to kill Haldar, Fellsworn, Tricksters, and Satyrs. Now the issue that I had with this quest is that there were hundreds of Tricksters and Fellsworn running around, and they were respawning quite quickly too. But the Satyrs on the other hand, just didn't seem to exist. I ran around for 20 minutes trying to find more than 2, and well, 30 minutes later, I was finally able to get it done and then turn in the quest. And sadly, that was it. Like I said, there were repeatable quests in the zone, but I wasn't sure if those were worth doing or not. So I just let them be. Besides, I still kind of wanted to get those marauding quests done anyway, so I began flying my way back to Desolace. After a good 30-ish minutes of waiting, I was able to form a party for a full run of marauding, which means this time we're going to be starting at the orange side of the instance. So we quickly picked up the quest along the way and began clearing our way through the entrance. First boss is Noxian. Loot-wise, nothing really interesting, however he does have a mechanic though, where he splits off into 3 smaller versions of himself, and we have to take those down first before Noxian reassembles himself. Pretty cool. The second boss is Razorlash, and he is significantly more interesting. He can drop us the Phyto Skin Spaulders. 16 agility would definitely last us till max level. Sadly though, he only gave us some boots. We then went all the way around to the purple side, where we once again fought Lord Viletongue, and again he can drop us those insane leggings, which he did not. We then once again went to take down Celebrus the Cursed, same as last time, except we now had the quest. We follow him over to this altar looking thing, and he casts a spell or something, and we each have to individually click the book, which allows us to complete the quest and claim the Scepter of Celebrus, which is obviously used for entering through the portal. We then jump down the waterfall and continue the run like we had many times already. However, this time we went all the way down to the right side, where we found and killed Tinkerer Gizlock. Again, not really any loot that we care about, but I suppose it's a bit of extra XP. The other difference this time is that we went all the way up to Landslide, and his loot really isn't all that great, except for the Rock Grip Gauntlets, which wouldn't be a massive upgrade by any means, but an upgrade is still an upgrade. And surprisingly, he does actually drop it, and we do win it. So no complaints there. Second to last is of course Princess. Same as every other time, no bracers. And of course we stopped by Rotgrip, who actually did drop the boots again. And that was it. Finally, we had completed a full quest run of marauding and could now turn in the quest, which just so happens to push me over into level 51, which means it is time to go to my all-time favorite zone in the entire game. Like many others, my favorite zone is Un'Goro. What is there not to like? The zone is bright with the natural atmosphere that has been created with the grass and the plants. Nice little streams of water running through the entire zone, and in a way this zone feels like it's isolated because the trees cover the sky with their thick leaves, and the zone is so natural it feels like it's been untouched. Lore wise, I don't know how true that last statement is, but my opinion still stands. I excitedly flew to Gadgetzan and began running into Un'Goro, and almost immediately I am stopped by an NPC called Torwa Pathfinder, offering 2 quests, one for now and one for later. I also stopped by this crashed raft for a quick quest that would have us diving for a small pack that we then needed to return to its owner. I then did Torwa's first quest that wanted a piece of a dinosaur carcass, and I then returned that to him and accepted the next quest, which I don't think I've ever been able to complete before because I couldn't figure out what it was that I needed to do. However, the quest does say something about eggs, which I found. Turns out the quest mob only spawns once you stand on top of the eggs, and honestly, I can't believe it's taken me 4 characters to figure that one out. So I completed that and returned it to Torwa, and then began making my way north and towards Marshall's Refuge. Now we had a lot, and I mean a lot of quests to get done here, which honestly I'm perfectly fine with because I just love the zone that much. So first off, I began moving down the right hand side of the zone in search of these giant mutant plants. We needed to collect 15 blood petals from them. Originally, I thought it was just a kill quest, but after murdering about 40 of them, I realized that something wasn't quite right. I also needed to collect 8 webbed Dimetrodon scales. Luckily though, there were hundreds of these things roaming around the zone, all of varying levels. So whilst I was doing other things, I could keep killing these at the same time. And since I had somehow ran all the way down here, I made a quick stop at the Ungoro Bug Hive, and using the feign death, face pull everything strategy, I was able to make it all the way inside, and we simply needed to collect a sample of the hive's wall. And again, since I was down here, I decided to slay some of the pterodaxes, and I think this was the only annoying quest in the entire zone, only because they spawned in just 3 separate spots with only about 2 mobs in each. But other than it just taking a bit of time, it was completely fine. I then moved to the west side of the zone to kill the other kind of pterodax and to continue my rampage on the Dimetrodon population. However, over here the mobs were a little bit higher than me, so honestly I didn't stay here for longer than I needed to, which was quite a while to be fair. The other thing I was kind of passively doing was picking up the power crystals, since we needed 7 of each colour. But eventually, my quest log was looking pretty much completed, except for a quest called Roll the Bones. This one honestly felt kind of broken. We simply needed 8 dinosaur bones, which sounds perfectly normal for World of Warcraft. However, they never wanted to drop. Like, I mean never. I must have killed at least 100 of these things before I got all 8. Before I turned in, I also went up to Fireplume Ridge to get the quest there, which honestly I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do since the elementals are so much higher level than I was. However, using my feign death, face pull everything strategy, we were able to get all the way to the top and complete the quest. And that's also when I got a message from my friend Aloons, asking if I wanted to do the elite quest with him, and well, obviously I said yes. So I headed over there and we could summon Lark Orwe, and I thought this quest would be way harder than it actually was because we just absolutely demolished this thing. And well, we were both here and we were both leveling, so we decided to stick together for a while and to complete absolutely everything there is to do in Ungoro. So we made our way back up to Fireplume Ridge and we started the escort quest, and this was incredibly efficient for me since we were escorting him right back to where I needed to turn in. And this quest was just like every other escort, except on this one the little goblin would occasionally just die on the spot and we had to then revive him. And after a good 10 minutes of running, we finally made it back to Marshall's Refuge, and I get to experience the euphoric sensation that is turning in like 10 quests at once. But after turning in, we still had a chunk of quests to do, so we decided to just get all of them done. And to start that off, we went into Gorilla Cave to kill gorillas, but also to turn in and pick up another quest. Unfortunately though, for that quest, we needed to turn in a mithril casing, which obviously neither of us had, so we skipped over it for now and went back down south to Torwa to turn in the gorilla quest. And in perfect WoW Classic fashion, we had to then go straight back to Gorilla Cave. But before we did that, we did a lap of the entire zone to scout the 3 coloured pylons, which we then immediately turned in, and not long before this, we hit level 52, which is big for us because we could now unlock Aimed Shot, a crucial part of the classic Hunter's rotation. And since we were going back to Gorilla Cave anyway, I sent us both a mithril casing from my main character so we could turn in whatever that quest inside was. Sadly though, my stupid ass didn't record the first gorilla quest, but all we had to do really was kill a mini boss called Ucha. Simple. But after turning in the mithril casing, we then started an escort quest. There was no special gimmick with this one, to be honest, unless you were counting the 3 times that he decided to just ignore the mobs and continue running to Marshall's Refuge. After that, we headed back to Fireplume Ridge for the last time to do a quest that Aloons had shared with me. We simply needed to kill some of the fire elementals and loot ash from them. Not too much to say about that, to be honest. And that was us finished. We had done pretty much every single quest in the entire zone. However, there was still one thing that we hadn't done within the zone. Aloon's profession choice was skinning, and what is one of the most iconic ways to make gold as a skinner? Devil Sword Leather, of course. So we decided to try and take one down. And you know how it is, we honestly didn't think that we would do it at first. But Gerald, being Gerald, almost single-handedly demolished this freak. So thank you for the session, Aloons. It was a lot of fun, and we managed to get a lot of progression together. Logging on to play the following day, we really only had one zone left to quest in, well for now at least, and that would be Fellwood, which is a pretty important zone, being home to the Songflower buff, but also Fellcloth and Demonic Runes, and having a pretty lucrative herbalism route. There wasn't an abundance of quests though, however the ones that were here would take quite a while to complete each, so I was prepared for a good few hours of questing, which would hopefully get me to level 53. So I started off this zone in the same way that everybody else does, by paying a visit to the Deadwood humanoid bear freaks. And every time I've done this quest before, I always struggle to locate the Deadwood Pathfinders. However, this time was probably the smoothest it has ever gone for me. We managed to slay every mob we needed pretty quickly, and we didn't get ganked by a full party of Horde even once. Isn't that just impressive? And since it was right here, I decided to quickly turn in the quest before moving deeper into the zone until I came across the Jadefire boys. Now these mobs are great. Not only will they provide me with a nice big chunk of XP, but they also have the chance to drop Fellcloth, which sells pretty well in the auction house. And they can also drop Demonic Runes, and well, Demonic Runes always come in handy. So I quickly killed the mini boss Silithus, and once again began moving north until I reached the Jadenar cultists. I think that's what they are anyway. And I went down into this underground bunker looking thing, and the mobs in here were super tightly packed and were honestly pretty hard to pull, and we almost died like 4 times. But in the end, I was able to clear out the entire thing and complete the quest. I then did what was probably the shortest quest of them all. Simply, we had to scout one of these Fellfire craters in the ground and then slay 4 elementals. Very simple. Next up was the Blood Amber quest. This was also incredibly simple. We had to loot 15 Blood Ambers, which normally would take a while since these types of quests usually like to make the drop chance like 4%. However, for these, the drop chance was 100%, which I'm not complaining about. After that, I of course turned in the quest, and unfortunately, there was only one follow-up quest, and that was to once again take out the Jadefire. But this time, it was the bigger, scarier ones. However, when I got there, I quickly took out Zavaric for his flute quest, and that was all I was able to do, because this spot was swarming with level 60s. I even swapped layer, and there was still full parties running around. So unfortunately, I really had no choice but to leave it alone for now, and instead went up to the Timbermaw area for another one of the weird bear killing quests. And at first, I really didn't think that it was going to be possible since all of the mobs were 3 and 4 levels higher than I was. However, Hunter might actually be the most broken leveling class, because we literally had 0 issues killing these guys. Every other class I've played so far, you at least had to be careful when killing higher level stuff, but Hunter just says no to all that and cuts down literally everything. Excitingly though, we actually found an epic BOE off of one of these mobs. I'm still not entirely sure if this is good, but it's purple. Now after turning that quest in, we were literally sitting on the edge of level 52, and I knew that turning in one more quest would be enough to tip us over into level 53. So I decided to run through into Winterspring, where I was able to find Donova Snowden to turn in a quest, which luckily got us to level 53. Last time, we managed to hit level 53 by questing through the hinterlands and Tanaris, and we were able to spam what is probably my favourite dungeon in the entire game, Moradin. And not only that, but we returned to my favourite zone in the entire game, which is of course Ungoro Crater. But now we only have 7 levels left, which doesn't sound like much, but those 7 levels are probably equivalent to going from levels 1 to 30, which is why the goal for today's video is to reach level 56. I had some big plans for the day, because today we will be high enough level to run what is one of the most important dungeons of our entire journey. However, for that, we would need to be around level 54-ish. So we had a level to gain first, and I decided that I wanted to go into the Plaguelands for a bit. So I hopped on a bird and began flying over to South Shore and began running towards Western Plaguelands. Once here, I did the regular collecting every quest ritual, and I also picked up my RG Emergent Dawn trinket. Not sure how useful that's going to be on this character, to be honest, but it's free, so why not? So to start things off here, I made a short journey to the east where I could find these graveyards, and here we had to kill ghouls and skeletons, and that kind of brings me to my next point. As far as the quests go in this zone, I think they're great. They're a lot of fun and are somewhat unique compared to the other zones. However, the zone itself really just isn't my thing. Subscribers of the channel will know that I'm not a huge fan of the whole death theme, and that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate the time that went into creating the zone. And that being said, the quests are so good, which means I actually do quite enjoy the zone as a whole. So after killing the ghouls, I needed to make my way over the bridge and into the ruins of Andorhal. And there is one more thing that I'm not a huge fan of, and it's the amount of mobs, which might sound silly at first, but it makes the zone feel a little crammed, like there isn't much room to move around. But as a hunter, it's really not that big of a deal, since we can just press feign death and boom, problem solved. So I made my way over to this field, which was absolutely swarming with ghouls. However, I saw on the map that there was a quest in the middle of them, which obviously means I wanted to get it. So I stood here for a good 10 minutes straight until the path was cleared for me. Turns out it was a Tauren that apparently was not having the greatest day. So after grabbing his quest, I once again started moving further into the zone until I found yet another field, which also had a quest inside of it, which means I wanted to find out what it was. But first, I wanted to get this other quest done. We needed to find the Fellstone Cauldron key, and as I was trying to find it, I was attacked by a rare mob called Foulmane. Always a great feeling to find one of these. Unfortunately, he didn't drop anything spicy though. As for the key, I couldn't quite seem to figure out where it was, so I grabbed the other quest inside the house, which I was able to do by face pulling all of the mobs and then feign deathing. It did not go as planned, but turning in the first quest in the house opened up another in the house next to it, and I'm not even kidding, I stood here for 30 minutes trying to carefully pull each mob, but no matter what I did, they seemed to respawn quicker than I could kill them, and I kept dying over and over again. And eventually, I just had to go with my patented face pull everything then feign death strategy, which worked fantastic, until I discovered that I in fact couldn't pick up the quest without the cabinet key. Isn't that just fantastic? So with that 40 minutes now completely wasted, I decided to start venturing up north a bit so that I could find these diseased wolves and kill them for the almost dead Tauren. Now, I quite like the idea of this quest, because the quest is called The Wildlife Suffers Too, and I think the idea behind this quest is that the Tauren wants us to kill them to end their suffering, which is a nice change of pace from murdering wildlife just because someone wants us to. And this quest did actually take us quite a while to complete, because I think the spawn chance is quite low. Like, I had to run around basically the entire north side of the zone until I was able to find all 8 that I needed. After that, I returned to the Fellstone Cauldron to turn in the quest because I had inexplicably acquired the item that I needed, and at first I couldn't figure out how to turn it in, but turns out you had to be practically hugging the very front of the cauldron. I then returned to the house that I was in earlier to pick up Janice's parcel, and using Gerald as a tank, I was able to get in and out unscathed. Unfortunately though, the place to turn that in was Stormwind, and well, it was time to turn in the other quests anyway, so I hearthed my way back to Stormwind and handed in Janice's parcel, which of course wanted me to instantly go back to Janice, which was fine because I was going back there anyway. Once we were back in Chillwind Camp, I of course turned in all of my quests, and then cleared my way to the dead Tauren again and turned in my wolf killing quest, and then immediately got started with his next quest, which was the exact same thing, except this time we were killing diseased bears instead of wolves. The other thing that definitely hadn't changed was the spawn rate, and once again I found myself running around for a while doing nothing but hunting down bears. Afterwards, I went to another one of the cauldrons where we had to kill a cauldron lord, loot the key, and then turn in the quest. I then had to run face first into another house back to Janice to turn in her quest from Stormwind. She then wanted us to find the other half of her good luck charm, which honestly wasn't too difficult. I had to simply head back into the field and find one of these jabbering ghouls and loot it off of them. I then turned that quest in, and sadly, that was the end of the chain. Might actually be the first quest chain that I had fully completed on this character. Next, I had to enter into the center of the zone, which is always quite a terrifying experience, purely because of how many mobs there are. What we needed to do here was quite simple though. There were 4 towers, each with a big scary elite mob inside of them. And I think the idea behind this quest is that we're supposed to kill the elite and then enter into the tower and then place down the torch. However, if you are very careful, you can actually place the torch torch inside while standing outside. Whilst I was doing that though, I entered into another house to find Chromie, everyone's favourite World of Warcraft character. The quest that she wanted us to do though was incredibly difficult. We had to find these giant silos and open up a temporal rift, which would spawn temporal parasites that we needed to kill. Now they weren't that difficult. I could quite comfortably kill 2 of them at a time. However, sometimes it would just keep spawning them. Luckily though, I discovered that this wall can be used as a reset spot, so that's what I did for the next half hour, jumping up and down from this stupid wall, killing parasites until the quest was completed. I then returned to Chromie and I began her next quest, which was nowhere near as annoying. So for this one, we had to run around these old broken down buildings and kill a couple mobs and then loot a watch from the chests. Very simple quest. After turning that in though, we could now purchase Chrono Boon Displacers from her. So that's what I did. I bought 50 of them. Apart from that though, the only quests left to clean up were the Cauldron quests, which managed to get us to level 54. Now that we are officially high enough level, it is time for our first run of our most important dungeon yet, Blackrock Depths. To be honest, I really wasn't all that bothered with what kind of BRD run I did, I just wanted the XP. Now this dungeon has a crap ton of bosses, potentially 27 of them if we were counting the rare spawns, which obviously means a lot of loot. Now there isn't anything that is best in slot, however, a lot of it is just straight up better than what I have. And at some point, I would really like to get the Dark Warder's Pauldrons, offering a nice 17 agility, Ghost Shroud giving 19 agility, and Swiftwalker Boots for 21 agility. And of course, the absolute king of them all, Savage Gladiator Chain. Now this is the one piece of loot that actually is best in slot for us. Now if you have been watching the channel for long enough, you will know that I spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to get this on my first character, like 150 runs. And to be honest, I'm still not sure if I really want to spend the rest of my life farming this piece of loot again. So the group that I managed to find, I believe they were intending on doing a full run of the dungeon, and we started it off by taking out High Interrogator Gerstan, and they dropped a cape offering 14 agility, which would be an upgrade over my current one, so I needed it and I won. We then went over and started up the Ring of Law, or Arena as it's affectionately known. The way this one works is we first take down a couple waves of adds, and then one of 6 different bosses will spawn, and one of them happens to be Gorosh the Dervish, the boss that can drop the Savage Gladiator Chain, but Gorosh only has about a 7% appearance rate, and well, we clear up the adds, and who shows up on our very first run? And I guess I don't really need SGC, so if it dropped, I would probably just pass it to the warrior, only we had no warrior. We had a paladin, a mage, a hunter, and 2 druids, so I would really be the only person who would utilize it properly. So now my head is going in the direction that this could be insane content. SGC dropping on our very first BRD run? Well, that's just depressing. We then began clearing our way down to General Angerforge. Now for 2 of my previous characters, my warrior and my druid, this boss would have been huge for them because of the trinket Hand of Justice. But as a hunter now, we don't really need it. And since then, Hand of Justice doesn't actually drop from here anymore. Instead, you have to go all the way to the very end of the dungeon to Emperor Dagran Thorasan. And I'm curious, in the original game back in 2004, did Hand of Justice move to Dagran then as well? Or is that just a new thing? The thing is, the tank that was in this group was clearly unfamiliar with BRD. And to top it off, our level 60 mage had decided to leave us. And they kept telling the tank that the boss is going to run away and you just have to leave him until he comes back. But we pull the boss and immediately the tank starts chasing after the boss. And honestly, it was just a mess, and big surprise, we wiped. And after this, the mage never ended up coming back, so we decided as a group to just disband. Although our one run of BRD didn't quite go as planned, I actually did list myself for another run, but it seems that no one really wants a level 54, so I decided to go off again and do some questing, and I decided on Winter Spring. Now obviously, I don't have the flight point for it yet, so I decided to fly to Ashenvale and run all the way through Fellwood just to turn in some loose quests that I had and to complete complete anything left off. So once I arrived at the Emerald Sanctuary, I turned in the quest that I had, and I really only had one follow-up quest left. So I decided to just complete it because why not? This quest was extremely simple. We had to venture into this underground bunker thing and extinguish 4 braziers. Luckily for me, a group of non-hostile horde had just cleared the entire thing out, so I was able to pretty much get in and out without any bother. The follow-up quest, we were supposed to be killing some kind of mini-boss, but I couldn't seem to figure out where they were, so in the end I just decided to skip it and start heading towards Winterspring, but not before making a stop at a songflower that was about to pop. Eventually, I had arrived in Winterluke, and just as usual, grabbed every quest available to me and immediately got started. Now here's the thing about Winterspring. Aesthetically, I think it's amazing. Quest-wise, I think it's pretty good. And the one thing I really like about the zone is that it feels like a max level zone. There's a lot of farmable stuff here, like the Echoes and the Winterfall Firewater, but that also creates a bit of a problem. A good 3 or 4 of the quests here wanted us to go to the humanoid bear thingies and then kill them. However, they are completely impossible to do because they are always camped by a full group of level 60s. So that kind of cuts our quest options in half. Once I had completed the quest on the frozen lake, I headed down south a bit where I made friends with a little gnome, and we decided to complete the quest here together. All we needed to do here was kill these owl freaks until one of them dropped a blue feathered amulet, which we were able to get done after only a couple of mobs. And since we were both together, we both then decided to go over to the Yeti filled area to collect Yeti fur. And if I'm being honest, it was really inefficient for us to be grouped up for this quest since the drops are individual. But after like 20 or so minutes, we both had collected all the fur that we needed, and we then went to turn it in because we both knew that the follow-up quest wanted us to come right back here again. For this one though, we actually had to venture deep into the frozen cave, and well, we were claiming our way through it, and I said 30-second BRB, but when I came back, my little French gnome was gone, which left me no choice but to finish the quest by myself, which wasn't too bad to be fair, since you know, we are a hunter. I did die on the way out though, and unfortunately, that was pretty much all we were able to do, because like I said, the bear quest would be impossible to do. We did however have a couple quests that wanted us to talk to someone in the Eastern Plaguelands, so I kept a hold of them for now, and maybe we could come back at a later date. Winterspring had managed to get us to level 55, and my plan was actually to head straight back into Blackrock Depths, but I thought that maybe it would be better if I got started with the Onyxia attunement first, so I took myself over to the Burning Steps. And well, if I was going to do the attunement quests, I might as well do the other quests at the same time. So I started off with the Ogre Murder, because I knew that these mobs were slightly lower than the rest. Okay, so Burning Steps. I would say that I quite like the zone. In my opinion, it is better than Searing Gorge, and that's because to me, Searing Gorge feels like a leveling zone, whereas Burning Steps feels way more like a max level zone. There's tons of elite mobs everywhere, and of course the Onyxia attunement. The Ogre quest wasn't really anything special though. Like I said, the ogres were a bit lower level than the rest of the zone, so we were able to cut through most of them with ease. I then decided to go balls first into the attunement quest, and I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be possible to do solo, so I was kind of just hoping that maybe another person in the zone could join me, and they did. Luckily, there was a level 60 mage here also trying to kill the elite mobs, so we teamed up and started taking it down together. And to be honest, every other time I had done this quest, I seemed to struggle a bit with finding the black dragon spawn, but this time there was literally no problem at all, and I think I got it done faster than I ever had before. And whilst we were doing that, we also made a quick stop at this cave to complete another quest. For this one, a big scary elite dragon would spawn, and we had to take it out and loot a black moat off of it. No complaints really, that one was just free XP. After around 20 minutes, we had managed to get the first attunement quest completed. We then said our goodbyes and we went our separate ways. I went off to the Black Rock Orcs area because we needed to collect 50 Blackrock medallions, and no, we didn't have to kill 50 of them. They luckily spawn in groups of 5, and to be honest, even if it was 50, I don't think I would complain that much, because I've started to realize recently just how much XP you actually get from just killing mobs. Once that was done, I obviously went to turn in, and for the second attunement quest, we then had to head back over to Stormwind, so I wasted no time and began flying over there. All we actually had to do was speak speak to Lady Katrana Prester. And you'll never believe I actually read the quest this time. What a day to remember. Once I had wasted 10 minutes reading a quest, I once again headed back over to the Burning Steps for my second round of quests. We had to go back over to the Blackrock Orcs where we could find Gortash. We simply had to kill him plus his little ad that comes with him and then rip off his head. I then headed up to the northern part of the zone to complete and pick up some more quests. I actually should have come here initially because I could have been completing these quests whilst I was doing the others. And you'll never believe, I sat and I read Ragged John's story. And you know, I actually quite like reading them. Give some context behind why I've been murdering everything. None of these quests were too outlandish though. I first went over to these ruins where I had to read a tablet transcript. Not too much to say about that really. But the other quest that we had to do involves the Broodlings. And this is why I say I should have came here initially. Because whilst we were doing the first attunement quest, I could have been doing this quest at the same time. And for our final quest in the Burning Steps, we had to head back up the Ogre Mountain where we had to plant Gortash's head into the ground for all the ogres to see. God, I love how gruesome this game can be sometimes. And that was it. We were pretty much fully done with the Burning Steps, apart from one or two quests that wanted me to go talk to an NPC at the other side of the world. But just like the Winter Spring ones, I decided to keep a hold of them for now and maybe we could come back later. When I logged on to play a little later, I had the greatest idea ever. I had basically just gotten done looking at a pre-base list of gear for hunters, and I noticed one weird piece of gear, the Royal Seal of Eldrith Alas. Quite simply, it would give us plus 48 ranged attack power, which is incredibly powerful. The reason I say it is weird though is because it doesn't come from a boss or come from a random quest. It comes from an item called the Greatest Race of Hunters. We had to purchase one of these from the auction house for literally 44 silver, and we then had to go into Dire Maul. Now, I don't think we are high enough yet to actually run Dire Maul, but we could enter into a DMT group, which had obviously cleared the instance. We simply had to go down into the library part of the dungeon, where I found this blood elf who wanted my book. And just like that, bye bye Lufa. And you know, since I was here, I decided to just pick up the DMT buffs, which means apart from Rend, I am now a fully buffed level 55. And that's including my DMF 10% damage buff. So with my shiny new trinket in hand, I obviously wanted to test it out, and what better way to do that than to head back into Blackrock Depths. So this group that I managed to get into were also trying to do a full clear of the dungeon, and lucky for us, a level 60 warrior tank had joined us. So there was no doubt in my mind that we were going to be able to clear it this time. First stop was Gerstan again, only this time we went through the middle part instead of around the sides, which I didn't even realize existed. And turns out this is where Gerstan actually hangs out. I still find it crazy that even after playing for the last 11 months, this game still has new things to explore. So we take down Gerstan, and this time a pair of really nice healing shoulder pads dropped. We then paid a visit to Marshal Windsor, and we weren't doing the jailbreak part or anything, which was fantastic for us, since that allowed us to get started with the next part of the Oni attunement. We then once again went over to Arena, and again I kinda had it in my head that it would be totally awesome if SGC dropped, since the warrior was already pretty geared, meaning I wouldn't feel as bad if I needed on it. Unfortunately though, Goros didn't spawn this time and was instead the stupid spider Anub Shia, and it dropped the Grave Rot Cape, which is honestly a pretty good tanking cloak. We then started moving down behind Arena to where Pyromancer Loregrain is. Now if I'm not mistaken, Loregrain is meant to be a rare spawn, yet I honestly can't remember a time where he wasn't here, but clearing him out would be a necessity if he wanted to turn in the Shadowforge key quest, and he dropped the Searing Scale leggings, which are actually pretty good as far as it goes. However, my Gnomeregan ones are better. We then clear our way all the way down to Warder Stilgis. Now like I said earlier, his pauldrons would be a pretty insane upgrade for us, and well, he does actually drop them, so that's a snap need for me, and we do win them, which is fantastic. We also had a quest here which was to collect the Heart of the Mountain from behind a locked door, but no one had the key. However, if you place yourself just right, you can actually pick it up through the wall, which I was able to do. Next up was Phineas Darkfire, another relatively important boss since we would need to kill him for the Shadowforge quest, and he dropped the Lead Surveyor's Mantle. Again, more healer loot. We then move on to Incendious. Now here's where things get a little bit interesting. First of all, the tank got yeeted off to the side, but that's not what I was talking about. It was established before we started that that we were doing a full run. And well, we were just following behind the tank as you do, assuming that we are now going to do the rest of the dungeon over by Angerforge. But instead, the tank basically said nah and then left. So he came into the dungeon, got his incendious quest completed, and then ditched us. Don't be like this guy. If you say you're going to do something with a group, you complete it. Don't just leave after you get what you needed. So after 2 failed runs of BRD, albeit the second one was significantly better than the first, I once again decided to go back in. However, this group was after the jailbreak part of the Oni attunement, and at first I thought they were going straight into the jailbreak quest, but turns out they were at the exact same part as me. So we started out by pre-clearing Marshall's path, which basically meant just clear every mob in a big ring around the dungeon. We then had to go and kill Angerforge plus Golem. And well, this tank was actually quite good. In fact, I even think at one point he said in the chat that he was quite enjoying playing Guardian Druid for the first time, and we were able to get Anger down no issue. And then it was on to Golem, and given our previous engagement with this boss, I was a little skeptical at first. But no, this tank played it very well, and by that I mean he didn't chase after the boss, and we managed to get him down. We then made a quick stop by Arena for some reason. Actually, I think that was my fault because we were talking about SGC, but big surprise, Gorosh didn't spawn, and instead we got the Eviscerator, who we got down nice and quickly. And then it was back to Marshall Windsor to start the worst part of the entire attunement. And to spare you the boredom, basically, he walks at the speed of a snail around the same ring that we pre-cleared earlier, and occasionally he spawns some ads. That's 15 minutes of my life that I will never get back. On the bright side though, this run did get us to level 56, which means we had completed the goal for today. But just because I wanted to, I thought I would complete the second to last quest in the attunement, where we have to meet Marshall Windsor at the gates of Stormwind, and then walk at the speed of a snail again all the way through the city until we get to the Stormwind Keep, where he reveals Lady Katrana Prester was a Nixia the entire time. Also, sorry to this gnome, he didn't deserve that. We then stand around for another 15 minutes, watching as the Stormwind guards get absolutely obliterated. Well, that's 30 minutes of my life that I will never get back. Last time, we hit level 56 by questing through the Plaguelands, Winterspring, and the Burning Steppes, and we even managed to take on what might be the most important dungeon in our entire journey, Blackrock Depths, which gave us some pretty big XP gains, but also we got a couple of gear upgrades too, and we even got our first piece of Prebis gear from Dire Maul, the Royal Seal of Eldre Thalas. With all of that now done and completed, today is a very special day, and it is time for our final push in the series, which is why the goal for today's video is to reach level 60, the maximum level in World of Warcraft Classic. So looking at the map, we don't really have that many places left to quest. I mean, we've been all over the world on this playthrough, and well, one of the very few places that we had left was the Eastern Plaguelands. So I flew over to the Western Plaguelands first and began making my way to the east. Almost immediately after entering the zone, I came across a very important NPC, Tyrion Fordring. Lore-wise, I think he's a pretty significant character. Not sure if that's true to be honest, but he's important to us because of a specific neck piece, the Mark of Fordring. With it offering 1 crit and 26 attack power, this would be the best out of raid neck slot item for us. So completing his quest chain would be one of my top priorities. So starting that off, he gave us 3 quests that are very simple. He wants us to kill 30 plague bats, collect 15 worm meat, and then kill 30 assorted types of plague hounds. Now I know that sounds like a lot, which it is, but these kinds of quests are perfect, especially right at the start of the zone, because they spawn basically everywhere, and whilst we were working on other quests, we can just do these along the way. On my journey to the east, I found Pamela Redpath, and what she wanted us to do was to collect the pieces of her doll and then return it to her. Basically, we searched the nearby ruins, which would spawn ghosts that would attack us. And I actually do remember doing this quest on my druid, and I remember that these ghosts would hit insanely hard. But since we are a hunter now, I've forgotten what it's like to be slashed by steel. After I had all the pieces I needed, did, I returned the doll to Pamela and once again began moving to the east. After around 30 minutes of running and killing, I had not only completed most of the murder quest, but we had made it to Light's Hope Chapel, and this place was filled with people, because at the time of recording this, I think it was 3 to 4 days after Phase 6 was released. So I grabbed every quest that I could, minus the level 60 invasion quests, plus I made sure not to be on a layer that any invasion was currently taking place, just to avoid as many horde as I could. And with that, I was ready to get started, but before I did, I noticed in my quest log that one of the quests simply wanted a bunch of items that I could purchase from the auction house. So since there was a mailbox right there anyway, I decided to log on to Cat and purchase everything to instantly turn in the quest. And let me tell you, it was a lot more expensive than I thought it would be. I started by buying the thorium, which was like 30 silver each, and by the time I'd gotten to the golden rods, I was already 20 gold deep in this thing. So now that we are officially on our way, I actually went all the way back through to the Western Plaguelands to pick up this wedding ring from a tombstone, and since it was here, I decided to go into the big central building, which granted was pretty difficult to even get inside of. What we needed to do was pick up a specific book from the floor that would also spawn a ghoul when we did. After that was completed, it was time to return to the Eastern Plaguelands, and I could now get started on the northern quests. And what better way to do that than with more murder quests? But you know, this one is actually quite unique, because kill quests are always just kill a certain amount of something or loot something off of their corpses. This one is basically the same, but when we kill one of these ghouls, a spirit will linger over the corpse and we have to talk to it to set it free. And I know that's basically the same, but at least it's different, you know, a bit of variety. But apart from that, it also took a while for me to get this one completed, because for some reason there was a ton of level 60s running this quest, and on one occasion I was killing a mob and then someone spoke to the spirit after I had killed it for their own quest completion. Cheeky dicks. Once I had finally gotten that done though, I moved further into the northern part of the zone where the Naxxramas entrance is, and here we had a couple of quests, but there was also an elite quest, and ordinarily we would never have been able to solo this because of the massive scary elite mob, and it's situations like this that really makes me think that Hunter is the most broken class, because using Gerald to distract the elite, we can quickly run in and set off the explosive for the quest. But after doing that a few times, my gear was really just not in the most pristine condition, so I quickly entered into this building, which was luckily cleared out by a level 60, and we simply had to pick up Augustus's recipe book and then return it to him. After hearthstoning back to Stormwind and repairing my gear, I actually decided to go back to the Western Plaguelands again, just because I wanted to make sure that I had gotten everything done. And very simply, we had to run around and collect skeletal fragments from skeletal berserkers. Now luckily, these guys were literally everywhere, and we were able to get it done fairly easily. Now the thing is, the follow-up quest wanted me to go all the way to Gadget-san, and normally I would say absolutely not, there is no way that I'm traveling to the other side of the world. However, you guys keep yelling at me for not completing full quest chains, so I thought, screw it, this time I will actually do it. I will travel to the other side of the world and I will see what I was missing. So I went all the way to Booty Bay from Western Plaguelands, then took the boat all the way to Ratchet, and then took a bird all the way to Gadget-san, where I turned in the quest, which then wanted me to go to Ungoro Crater. So I sent myself the thorium bars that were required for the quest and went all the way there as well. What we needed to do was go up to Fireplume Ridge and forge the unfinished skeleton key, which was actually quite cool. It made the ground shake and everything, which made me think that I was completing a quest chain that was actually quite significant. So I googled it, and turns out we were in the middle of the Scholomance key quest chain, which in my mind would be quite handy to have, so I was looking forward to finishing it. But before I went back to the Plaguelands, I first made a stop in Ajara, because I had a quest here as well, but we simply needed to stealth in and pick up another book. A 45-minute round trip, and I'll be totally honest, not sure that that was worth it. So I returned to the Western Plaguelands again, and I was excited to turn in this key quest and see what that was all about, only to be greeted with a level 60 elite killing quest. Well, looks like I'm not getting my key, for now anyway. And again, since I was here, I decided to head to the very north part of the zone and to complete some of these Scarlet quests. And starting that off, we had to clear our way into this sawmill looking building and set off an explosion of termites, which is pretty grim when you think about it. We then had to kill a couple different types of Scarlet mobs. Now, the thing is, the Scarlet Knights were perfectly relatively easy to kill. They were just roaming around minding their own business. But for the rest of them, they were all surrounded by other mobs that would lead to situations like this. But thanks to a friendly orc warrior, he saved mine and Gerald's ass from almost certain death. After I'd managed to get that done, we then had to take down Huntsman Radley, which was kinda the same situation as the last quest where the mobs were just everywhere. But thanks to feigned death and the sacrificing of Gerald, we were able to get all the way behind the mobs and target Radley on his own. Now at first, I wasn't sure if the fight was going to go the way that I wanted it to, since there was 2 extra mobs with Radley. But you know, it wasn't any bother at all, which I'm again going to blame on hunters being absolutely broken for solo content. I mean, could you imagine me trying to do this on my warrior? It just wouldn't be possible. After taking down Radley, I went over to Hearthglen for another solo elite quest. What we had to do was overlook the POI from a high vantage point, and ordinarily, you would need a full party to even have a shot at getting this done. But again, I think feigned death might actually be the most broken ability in the entire game. With that now done, I think that's pretty much most of Western Plaguelands finished, so I returned once more to Light's Hope Chapel, where I could turn in literally 10 quests at once, including returning to Tyrion to turn in his quests and listen to his story, which got us to about 2/3 of the way through level 57. So of course, to start off the second round of quests, I immediately moved to the south of the zone to complete the next of Tyrion's quests. We needed to loot a hammer from a grave. However, when you do, it spawns 4 mobs that we had to kill. Now every single time I've tried to do this quest solo before, it was either just straight up impossible, or I logged on to my mage and I AoE'd them down for myself. My first attempt at it went about as well as I was expecting, but on the second attempt, I was able to nuke down the big mob that we needed to loot, and then pop Aspect of the Cheetah and make a run for it. 4 characters deep into this game, and I think this is the first time that I've been able to solo this quest. If that isn't direct proof that hunters are overpowered, then I don't know what else to say. So I returned to Tyrion quickly to turn in the quest and began my final few quests of the zone. Very simply, we had to dive into a lake and pick up a symbol of lost honor for Tyrion, then dive into another lake to pick up a skull of some kind, which I think was supposed to be getting guarded by some undead spirit looking things, but they were currently fighting some friendly mobs, so I just left them to it and I snuck in to grab my thing. I then quickly returned to Tyrion once again to turn in, who now wanted us to go to Scholomance Island, and I did say that I wanted to get this done, so that's what I did. I travelled to Scholomance Island where I found artist Renfrey, who after turning the quest in, immediately wanted me to go back to Tyrion, which apparently I did not record. But the follow-up quest he offered wanted me to go to Stratholme, which currently we were not high enough level for. And that was it, I think. We were pretty much done with the Plaguelands. The only remaining quests were either elite, dungeon, or invasion quests. We were now getting pretty close to level 60, only 2 levels left, which okay, fair enough, is still like 16 hours of gameplay, but I was now really starting to think about gear, so I decided to buy myself the Dark Phantom Cape, a cape that would give us plus 15 agility, which okay, isn't quite as good as the cape of the Black Baron, but it would still be insanely good, especially for only 7 gold. And well, I was looking at the Wowhead page for the Prebase Hunter gear, and that's when I saw it, the Wormhide Spalders. Simply, they would give us 2% hit. And sure, the True Strike shoulders from UBRS are just straight up better, but if you watched my Druid series, then you'll know that these things don't seem to like me very much. Now lucky for us, the Wormhide Spalders simply come from a quest in Blackrock Depths, so I decided to find myself a group and ask them if they would help me take out Baelgar, which worked out perfectly since the tank apparently also needed them. Now this boss I didn't recognise at all. I don't think I've ever fought him before, which honestly is a bit insane that BRD still has things that I hadn't seen, despite being the dungeon that I had probably ran the most out of any of them. And to be honest, Baelgar was actually quite tough, and by the time we had gotten him down, everyone was out of mana and had a big chunk of health missing. But for the quest, we simply had to use an item on his corpse to collect his fiery essence. And apart from that, we actually then went and did a decent amount of things in here. including hitting level 58. We took out High Interrogator Gerstan, we did the entire Jailbreak escort, took down Anger plus Golem, and even went into the Dark Iron Tavern to kill Hurley Blackbreath and Ribley Screwpot. Everything was going pretty smoothly. That was until I decided to press multi-shot in possibly the worst position possible, which pulled the entire room and wiped us. But not to worry, we respawned and we went at it again. Now sadly, the warlock that was with us decided that he would complete the quest that he needed and then leave us. Now unfortunately, after that, we had to just disband. And I said it in the last video, and I'll say it here again, if you're going to do something with a group, you stay and you complete it. Don't just go and do what you need to do and then dip. So now that I had my beautiful shoulders, I once again went back to looking at the pre-BIS list of gear, and I noticed that a lot of the gear comes from one specific place, a place that I had never been before, Dire Maul. Well, okay, I've obviously been here before in order to get the DMT buffs, but I've never ran the dungeon before, and well, I was expecting big ogres with massive weapons, but no, this one was filled with living trees. But not only trees, it was also filled with arcane elementals that were apparently quite important, because in order to take down a boss called Imulthar, we needed to clear out, I think, 5 of these elemental packs. The first boss is Tendrous Warpwood. Now he's actually quite interesting. First of all, he can drop the Warpwood Bindings, a fantastic waste slot item that would provide 14 agility and 1 crit. But he's also interesting because if you didn't take out every single tree patrol, then whatever ones remained would then come to his aid in the fight. And I think it's pretty cool that the boss interacts with the rest of the dungeon. We then began moving upstairs where we had to take out some very hard hitting spirits until we came across the boss Magister Calendris. Loot wise, we didn't really care about anything he drops, that he really wasn't that difficult. The only notable thing he did was cast a mind control onto one of the players, and we got him down without any issues. We then moved even more upstairs to where we found Ilyana Ravenoak, who I think is like a hunter since there was also a bear there. As for the loot, again, there really isn't anything we cared about from her. We then went downstairs and through the door until it opened up into this gigantic room, and this looked really sick. The middle of this room had that big boss Imulthar, and he was protected by like an arcane shield, almost like he was trying to contain him. The boss itself, I think, is a unique character model. I know, a non-reused model, can you believe it? But then again, I'm not actually sure if that's true. Loot wise, again, nothing we really care about, and I don't think I noticed any sort of mechanic from him either. He kind of just stood there and meleeed the tank. The last boss is a lot less cool, Prince Tortheldrin, but he can drop the Bracers of the Eclipse. Now, I know this thing doesn't look very impressive, but as far as bracers go, this thing is actually the best we can get pre-raid. But of course, he didn't drop them anyway, and with that, I can officially say that I have done my very first run of Dire Maul. Now there's actually 3 different versions of Dire Maul. That one was the west version, but what I needed was the Dire Maul east version. So I stayed around and I waited for a group, and whilst I was, someone in the group told me that there was a rare mob in the middle that has the potential to drop some very expensive items. So me and the rogue jumped in. I put Aspect of the Cheetah on and I kited the mob around the arena whilst the rogue did his absolute best to not take aggro off of me. And well, after about 6 minutes of kiting, me and the rogue managed to get him down, and he dropped the Orb of Deception and the Dreamwalker armor. Combined, they would sell for about 45 gold, which definitely isn't nothing. And well, I won both of them. With that now done though, we could actually get started. Now the weird thing is, we weren't going to be running the dungeon normally. We were going to be doing what is known as a jump run, which basically targets the last couple of bosses and skips most of the trash, which for me was a bit unfortunate because I was actually in here because I wanted to get the Dire Maul key. But you know, it's all for the experience, right? So we sneakily made our way through all of the walking plants until we got to the first boss, Hydrospawn. Very similar to Noxie in this one, because he does basically nothing and sometimes spawns smaller versions of himself. Awesome. But he did drop some leather boots. The next boss is Zevram Thornhoof. Loot wise, we don't care. Now, I don't don't like this boss for one specific reason. He sacrificed Gerald, which did indeed kill him. But with my heart now broken because of Gerald's death, we moved all the way down to the final boss, Alzin the Wildshaper, who once again doesn't drop anything we care about. The only real mechanic that he has is that when his health reaches 50%, he spawns a gazillion imps to come and attack us. And the rogue did almost die, but in the end we were able to take him down. But we weren't done just yet, because someone in the group then went and spawned in the tier boss Ysalian. Now this would be pretty huge for us, because of the weapon that could drop, the Huntsman Harpoon, offering a massive plus 35 agility, which obviously is the absolute best weapon for us pre-raid. But just like everything else in this game, it did not drop. Now although we did just do a run of Dire Maul East, I still wanted to get myself the key, so I once again stuck around. But this time we were actually going to clear the dungeon normally. Now the way we get the key is basically a quest, but it's not really a quest. We have to talk to the imp Puslin multiple times, and each time we do, he would run away and we would have to chase him. So that's what we did. We chased him all the way around the entrance room until he goes down a little hallway where we can speak to him for one last time, and he transforms into a giant demonic imp who we have to then take down and then loot the key. Now unfortunately, we were making our way through to the end boss where we accidentally pulled one too many packs of mobs and it wiped us, and then the healer left. So unfortunately, we had no choice but to abandon the run, which honestly I was okay with because it was getting pretty late anyway. When I logged on the next day, I can't lie, I really just wanted to do some questing, but looking at my map, we had been literally everywhere, and that's when I remembered. Silithus. I had totally forgotten that Silithus does actually have quests available for levelers, so I wasted no time and began flying over there. Of course, we don't have the flight point yet, so we were running from Ungoro Crater, which is perfectly fine honestly, because Ungoro is just such a beautiful zone. After a short 5-minute trip, we had made it to Cenarian Hold, and I could begin picking up most quests. Not every quest, because some of them were level 60 story based quests, and I just didn't want to do those just yet. Now here's the thing about Silithus. Aesthetically, I would honestly say it's just a bit meh. The bug theme in my opinion has kind of worn off, but that might just be due to the massive amount of time that I had spent grinding out Earthstrike and running AQ40. However, that's not to say that I didn't enjoy our time in this zone though, because if you look at the quests, you can see that every single one of them is a kill quest, which are of course my favourite. And to be honest, that was kind of me set for a couple hours. All the mobs we needed to kill spawned everywhere, so I could just chill for a bit and run around and kill as many things as I wanted. On the plus side, I actually made a solid bit of gold from this as well, primarily due to the sandworm meat, because my main character has maxed out cooking and I could craft the meat into smoked desert dumplings and sell them for like 4 gold each. And everything was perfectly normal until I got an invite to join another Dire Maul run, and well, how could I possibly say no? So this run started out being perfectly normal. We got down to Tendra's Warpwood and took him down, and you'll never believe he actually dropped the waste piece this time. Finally, a piece of gear for us. And the rest of the run was nothing out of the ordinary. We moved upstairs where I was reunited with the quest giver from earlier and I could turn in the quest, which just so happens to push us over into level 59, which means only one more level to go. But we get down to Imolthar and we take him down just like normal. And that's when the Warlock started up a quest that was apparently for the epic Warlock mount. And almost immediately we were getting swarmed by imps and demons. And at first it really wasn't that bad, but after literally 10 minutes of nothing but imps, everyone's health was low, our mana was drained, and sadly, we wiped. But we respawned, and I think everyone was expecting to have to restart the entire encounter, but no, we were actually right at the end of it anyway, and we were able to finish off the last of the imps. But that's when the big scary demon guy and his mount spawned in to attack us, and to be honest, he was a lot easier to take down than the trash was, which is something I've come to notice about WoW Classic. Sometimes the trash is actually harder than the bosses, but we are not done just yet, because we then went to take down Prince Tortheldrin and claim my shiny new bracers, which never dropped. Now that we had gotten at least some kind of gear upgrade, I once again returned to Silithus to finish up anything that we had left there. And again, it was just a whole lot of killing. Scorpions, worms, spiders, you name it. If it was in the zone, you best believe we were going to be killing it. And I also had to go up to the very northwest of the zone to collect some Twilight tablets. And to be honest, I didn't think that this area would be as quiet as it was, since usually there's hordes of people farming these elementals for elemental earth. I then decided to head south for a bit for another solo elite quest. What we had to do was pick up Noggle's satchel, and I think the idea behind this quest is that you're supposed to kill the elite mob Death Clasp, but again, we are playing the most broken class in the game, and we were able to do it completely solo. We also had to pay a visit to all 3 of the Twilight camps in order to kill 3 different Twilight Keepers in order to collect some book pages. I then turned that quest in and had to immediately return to the Twilight camps to collect encrypted Twilight text. Now, I am very familiar with farming these, because a few months ago, these Twilight texts were going for upwards of 4 gold each, and for a couple months at least, farming these would be my main source of gold income. Sadly though, these days they have dropped to only about 1 gold each. I then returned to Ortel for a final time, and that was it. We had done basically every single quest in Silithus, and I gotta say, it was a lot of fun. Like I said, aesthetically, I thought it was pretty ugly, but the questing here is just so chilled out. We were now getting pretty close to level 60. We only needed about a quarter of a level, and initially I wanted to go to Upper Blackrock Spire because I had just picked up the final Onyxia attunement quest, but I ended up going for a run of Lower Blackrock Spire instead, which I forgot to hit record on. And the unfortunate thing is, whilst doing this run, one of the officers in my guild had offered to take me, a level 59, into Zul'Gurub, which would have been an insanely epic way to hit level 60. But I think I've made it pretty clear that I don't like deserters, and I kinda felt the need to stay with this group anyway. We first made our way down to Huntmaster Voon. Now, if you remember way back on the Druid series, we actually got the gems for the UBRS key in 2 runs. However, this time around, we don't really need it, to be honest. We then moved upstairs to Shadowhunter Vosh. Now, this one is pretty big for us because of the crossbow Black Crow. Plus 3 agility and 1% hit. I believe this is one of, if not the best ranged weapon for us. Unfortunately though, it dropped Rip Hook, which actually isn't that good for us at all. We then dropped down and took on Mother Smolderweb. Pretty simple fight. As long as you kill the little spiderlings, you're good. And she dropped the Wild Heart boots. Next up is Quartermaster Zigris. Now, originally, I thought that the Cloud Runner girdle that he could drop would be the best in slot belt for us, but turns out it would just be a straight up downgrade. And weirdly, he didn't drop a single item, not even that weird footlocker thing that he usually drops. We then take down Halcyon. Not really much to say about this one, to be honest, apart from the fact that I managed to get the quest here done. And lastly is of course Overlord Wormthalak. Now, this one can actually be quite tough. I remember when I was tanking it, he can sometimes send you flying into the air, which resets threat, but apart from that, he does just hit incredibly hard. Now, he did actually drop the Beastmaster's mantle, which I needed on. Now, I know this individually looks like it's just a straight up downgrade from our current ones, but I believe if you get the Beaststalker's mantle, chest, and legs, you can then turn all 3 of those in to get the best in slot pair of boots. So I thought I might as well take it just in case we decide to do that. Now, after our Lower Blackrock Spire run, we were so incredibly close to hitting max level that I was just hoping that maybe, just maybe, our quest turn-ins would get us to level 60. But unfortunately, that was not the case. But not to worry, because I randomly got a message asking if I wanted to come to Scholomance. And well, obviously, I said yes. So we entered into the dungeon and started clearing our way through. And really only after about 5 minutes, it happened. We hit level 60. And I can now officially say that I have successfully leveled 4 entire characters in World of Warcraft Classic. If you have made it this far into the video, then please let me know in the comments, because seriously, it means the absolute world to me, and I cannot thank you guys enough. About a month and a half ago, we hit 10,000 1,000 subscribers, which is honestly just insane to even think about. And now we're almost about to hit 12k, and I mean, together we have grown the channel from absolute nothing into one of the greatest little communities on YouTube. And I know that a lot of you prefer these nice long videos, so I really hoped you enjoyed, and once again, thank you. Apart from that, I have been very busy recently. I've just got so many ideas and it feels like just not enough time to do it all. Plus, the gold requirement for raiding now is absolutely insane. It's just got to the point that I might actually have to skip out on certain raiding videos simply because I cannot keep up with the gold demand. On that note though, I did raid Naxxramas for the first time ever last week, and that video should be ready to go soon enough. The undisclosed hunter business video is on its way now too, plus we've still got more classes to level up, and TBC is only a couple months away, and I've got to farm 1500 gold every week just to raid. So lots to do, but I am slowly working my way through it all, and hopefully I will be able to share them all with you soon enough. Anyways, I think that is enough yapping for today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.